The weakest player entered the tundra to die for insurance money. Instead, his weather system exposed every hidden route, cache, and killing zone. Daniel Kim lay abandoned at -42, bleeding beside a dead teammate. His guild commander had fled, leaving Daniel with minutes to live. The blue briefing screen turned danger into exact survival percentages. Following its recommendations raised even to percent survival to 38. Daniel burned his wound shut, crawled to supplies, and survived. Soon, those tundra secrets would rescue dozens and make him rich. +7 percentage points. Daniel pressed his face into the snow, counted his breaths, and forced his freezing body to keep moving. On the 40th breath, he rose onto all fours, and by the 60th, he began crawling northeast toward the marked supplies. The screen traced a thin blue route northeast, functioning like a global positioning map across featureless snow. Instead of a car, he had bleeding elbows, and instead of a safe destination, he had a dead player buried beneath the snowdrift. His fingers are scraped raw to the flesh, his pinned-down thigh drags through the snow, and every jerk sends a searing pain through him. But 38% is better than 0, and 0 awaits him if he stops. You're in place. He digs with his hands. The snow was packed hard by the wind, but Daniel dug until his hand struck a buried sleeve and backpack. At 40, he pulls it out, a first aid kit to bandages, antiseptic for energy bars, a canteen, and a signal flare. He bandages his thigh over the burn. His hands are shaking, the knot comes out crooked, but the bleeding stops. He swallows an energy bar without tasting it. His body devours the calories like a wood-burning stove. The screen guides him onward. The screen marked shelter 20 meters west. Inside a narrow rock niche that was 20 degrees warmer than the open tundra, Daniel crawls into the crevice between the rocks. He pulls his knees up. He hugs the dead man's backpack. The screen dims. Briefing in for hours. Standby mode. He closes his eyes and for the first time thinks not of survival, but of his mother. His mother slept inside St. Luke's Hospital, believing her son was interviewing for work in Anchorage. He didn't tell her about the tundra. He wrote a long letter in case he didn't return. She'll be angry, of course. First, she'll cry, then she'll get angry, then she'll cry again. He knows this cycle by heart. Like a weather pattern. 38%. Not bad. There have been worse forecasts. His body shuts down like an emergency generator. The screen woke him at 6 in the morning, and Daniel opened the first complete briefing of his new life. 30 square kilometers. His sector glows as a white dot in the center around the line, red, yellow, blue. The pack routes. The snowhounds are moving in 3 groups. The second will pass by his hideout at 9:30. The third will block the southern passage by 11. And something clicks inside Daniel. Something old. Something familiar. 3 monitors. Coffee. Satellite images. Here's the low-pressure system. Here's the front. Here's the window. He sees the window. Between 9:30 and 11, the pack will split up. A clear corridor to the southwest. Head out at 9:45 and reach the Rocky Massif where the packs don't hunt into hours. The weather report is perfect. The wind is from the northeast. It'll warm up by 4 degrees by 10 in the morning. No ether anomalies. And then the screen marks a third point. A fresh corpse with intact gear at 3 meters away. And next to it, a green marker, a living person. And the pack schedule at 11:47. The snowhound will pass directly through this point, chasing that green marker. Daniel zooms in. The marker is moving slowly. She's wounded. She's heading straight for the corpse, but she doesn't know about the hound. He closes his eyes. If he grabs his backpack and leaves at 9:45, he'll survive. Probability 63%, a reliable prediction. If he goes to the green marker, the probability will drop. He sends the first query. What if I go to that person at 11? The screen processed the question for 3 seconds. Probability of survival 41%. The probability of survival for the nearby subject rises from 9 to 44. 41 for himself, 40 for her, or 63 for himself alone. In Seattle, insurance companies used to make these kinds of decisions. Numbers on the monitor. Human lives in columns of tables. He always hated those tables. He crawls toward 11. His hip burns with every movement. 300 meters is an eternity for someone who can barely move. He finds the corpse at 1,120. Heavy armor. The expensive knife on his belt is too heavy for him. He takes the second signal flare from the dead man's hip and crawls behind a ledge. The green marker is approaching. A tall girl, dark hair dusted with frost, a shard of a spear in her hand. Her left leg drags behind her. She walks toward the corpse to get the knife, unaware that in 17 minutes, a creature will leap out from behind the ridge. 11:47. A howl pierces the silence. The snowhound burst out from behind the rocks. White, long, 6 paws, a jaw like a trap. The girl spins around and raises her spear. But the creature is closer and faster. Daniel fires a flare. Red fire arcs over the hound's head. It jerks its head upward. 3 seconds. That's enough. The girl strikes it under the jaw with her spear. The blade sinks between the plates. The creature wheezes. It twitches. It falls. The girl collapses beside it. They lie in the snow meters apart, while the hound thrashes in agony between them. She turns her head. Her eyes are gray. Her face is covered in someone else's blood. You? How did you know? Daniel hands her the flask. He says he's a meteorologist, that he was just watching which way the wind was blowing. She looks at him as if he'd flown in from Mars. Then she burst out laughing through her sobs and says, "That is meteorology just saved her life. Her name is Maeve Sullivan, 26 years old, Boston. Former firefighter. A spearwoman in the White Blade Guild, which abandoned her just as the Pine Harpoon abandoned him. She's wounded in the leg. He's wounded in the thigh. Together, they can't even outrun a lame dog." But Daniel is looking at the map. A rocky outcrop 2 kilometers away. The packs are giving it a wide berth. They have until 11. There's enough time if they leave now. He tells her he knows a safe route. She asks where he learned it. He replies that it's a long story. Maeve looks at the dead hound at the signal launcher in his hand. And she says that long stories can be told on the go. They walk for 3 hours. 2 kilometers in 3 hours. To limping people in the black tundra. Twice they hide behind rocks when the red lines get too close. Maeve doesn't ask questions. She just goes where he tells her to because the first time he was right. The rock formation greets them with silence. No wind, no howling. Maeve finds a crevice big enough for 2. Daniel gives her 2 energy bars. She eats one and shoves the second one back at him. She says he looks worse. He doesn't argue. They sit in the dark, 2 strangers in a rocky crevice at the edge of the world. Daniel stares at the screen. Flocks are heading east. The sector is clear until morning. Probability of survival until the next briefing, 67%. He closes the screen. Yesterday it was 2. The forecast is improving, 6 in the morning. The screen flashed in the darkness. Daniel opened his eyes. His body ached as if it had been put through a meat grinder. His thigh throbbed with the dull, burning pain beneath the bandage. The fingers on his left hand wouldn't bend. 2 of them were white, early-stage frostbite. But he was alive. Maeve was sleeping, leaning against a rock. Her spear broken in half lay across her knees. Even in her sleep, she hadn't let go of it. Daniel opened the briefing. The map updated across another 30 square kilometers, revealing their position and every snowhound route scheduled for that day. The snowhounds had headed east, clear until noon. But a new group was rising from the south. The ice worms. For ice worms were rising from the south, and their route would cross the rocky shelter at 4:20 that afternoon. That means they need to leave by 4 in the afternoon. Weather report. The wind will die down by 10 in the morning. Temperature -35. By evening, it will warm up to -28. By tundra standards, it's practically a resort. No ether anomalies. Caches, the screen marked for points. One of them made him hold his breath. For kilometers to the southwest. One unexplored ancient cache waited for kilometers southwest, buried 3 meters deep beside 2 living green markers. Together, Daniel looked at the distance for kilometers with injured legs. That's a 5-hour walk. The flock's route leaves a corridor from 10 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon tight, but doable. He woke Maeve. She opened her eyes instantly. Her hand clenched the spear. A reflex. Then she recognized and relaxed. He said they needed to move, that the ice worms would be here at 4. She asked how he knew. He said it was because of the clouds. Maeve looked up at the ceiling of the crevice. Rock, no clouds. Then she looked at him and said, "All right," since his clouds had saved her life yesterday. She wasn't going to argue with his clouds. They left at 10 in the morning. Maeve was limping, but walking quickly. A former firefighter. She was used to working through the pain. Daniel walked more slowly. With every step, his hip shot with pain from his groin to his knee. But the screen showed a clear path, so he kept going. 2 hours later, they saw smoke. A thin gray wisp rose from behind a stone ridge, half a meter ahead. Maeve stopped, her hand on her spear. Smoke in the tundra meant one of 2 things. Either a live camp or a trap. Daniel looked at the screen. 2 green markers, both stationary, not a single yellow one, not a single red one. He told Maeve that it was one of their own. She asked how he could be sure. He said he was sure, just sure. Maeve clenched her jaw, but followed him. They rounded a ridge and saw the camp, if you could call it that. A tarp stretched between 2 boulders beneath it. A fire made of some kind of chemical briquettes, and the figures, the first, small thin, wrapped in 3 jackets, one on top of the other, the hood pulled down over her nose. Only her eyes were visible black, shifty, frightened. The second one, tall, calm, light hair pulled back into a ponytail. Her hands are in medical gloves. She's bandaging the first one's shoulder. Both froze when Daniel and Maeve emerged from behind the rocks. The tall one stood up slowly between herself and the short one, shielding her with her body. Daniel raised his hands. He showed his open palms. He said they were injured and posed no threat. Maeve, standing next to him, lowered her spear, its tip touching the snow. The tall woman stared at them for 10 seconds. Then she stepped back. She said she was a doctor, that she would bandage their wounds if they didn't do anything stupid. Her name was Sarah Linderin, a 28-year-old trauma surgeon abandoned by the Grey Asp Guild. The younger one's name was Cho Yuna, 22 years old, from Korea, a hacker. She'd ended up in the tundra, under a forced contract for hacking into a banking network, the Southern Hammer Guild. They'd been cast out. For people, for guilds, all cast out. Daniel sat down by the campfire. Sarah examined his thigh. She said the burn had saved his life. Rough, dirty, but effective. She rebandaged it properly using a real first aid kit with real bandages. She treated Maeve's wound, a deep cut on her shin, 6 stitches. Maeve clenched her teeth and didn't make a sound. Only the knuckles on her fingers turned white as she gripped the spear shaft. Yuna sat in the corner and watched them from beneath 3 hoods. She didn't say anything. She just watched. Daniel took a candy bar out of his backpack. The last one. He broke it into 4 pieces. He handed one to each of them. Yuna took her piece and tucked it into her pocket. She didn't even say thank you. Sarah took hers and nodded. Maeve took hers and said that if he kept giving away his food, he'd die of starvation rather than from the creatures. He replied that hunger was predictable, but the creatures weren't. Maeve snorted, then a little laugh. Probably the first one in today's. Daniel was looking at the map. An ancient cache 2 kilometers away, unexplored. There might be gear there, food, weapons, or nothing. The system doesn't show the contents, only whether it's there. He asked Sarah how long they'd been here. She replied that it was their 3rd day. They had enough food for 1 more day. They were melting snow for water. Yuna had a wound in her shoulder. It's not deep, but without antibiotics, it could get infected. Daniel nodded. He looked at Maeve, at Yuna, at Sarah. For people all wounded, minimal supplies. 100 kilometers from the nearest base. By tundra standards, they were already as good as dead. But he had a map. He said there was a cache 2 kilometers to the south. An old one that hadn't been looted. If they made it there, they'd find something useful. Sarah asked how he knew. Maeve answered for him. She said it was because of the clouds with a completely serious expression. Yuna spoke up for the first time quietly with an accent. She said you couldn't see any clouds here. Maeve claimed invisible clouds explained everything. Then the 4 wounded survivors departed at 1 in the afternoon. For limping people 2 kilometers, Daniel walked ahead, a screen before his eyes. A clear path until 3. The ice worms were far away. The hounds were to the east. He led them between the red lines of the flocks like a navigator steers a ship between reefs. Turn left. Wait for minutes now to the right. Go around this hill. Maeve followed him and asked no questions. Sarah supported Yuna by the elbow, and they reached the ancient cache at 2:30 without meeting another patrol. A stone slab embedded in the ground. The edges were smooth, too smooth for natural stone. Ancient civilization. Maeve tested the slab with her broken spear while Daniel examined a narrow gap, running around its smooth edges. Yuna stepped closer. Silently, she pulled a multi-tool from her pocket. She slipped the blade into the gap. She turned it. Something clicked. The slab slid aside with a soft hiss. Beneath it was a staircase leading down. 3 meters below the slab, a dim blue staircase descended into a compact room built from smooth black metal. The compact chamber had black metal walls, orderly shelves, and 12 sealed containers waiting beneath the tundra. Energy briquettes. Not human. Not clear whose, but the system marked them as edible. 300 units of calories per briquette. Taste unknown. Second container. Thermal fabric. 5 pieces. Lightweight. Warm. The third, medications. Sarah opened it and froze. Then she said quietly that there were antibiotics inside. Synthetic. A different chemical composition, but a broad spectrum of action. That changed everything. Food for a week. Warm fabric. Medications. For abandoned survivors, had turned one hidden cache into for real chances. Yuna stood by the far wall. She ran her finger along the black metal. Then she turned to Daniel. Her eyes were no longer frightened. They were alert. She asked how he'd found this place. He said it was based on weather data, a temperature anomaly on the surface. Underground structures create a characteristic thermal signature. It was a lie. A beautiful and convincing one. Yuna looked at him for another 3 seconds. Then she said he was a very strange meteorologist, and she turned away toward the containers. They set up camp right inside the bunker. They turned off the heater. It was 10 inside. After -35, it felt like the tropics. Sarah handed out antibiotics to herself, to Yuna, and to Daniel for his wound. Maeve refused. She said she had an immune system like a horse's. Sarah said that horses can get sepsis, too. Maeve grumbled, but took the pill. They ate ancient civilization rations. They tasted like cardboard soaked in something nutty. Not terrible, not good. Calories. Yuna ate half and hid the rest. A habit. Daniel noticed but didn't say anything. Instead, he slid his second ration brick toward her. She looked at him. He was looking at the map, pretending not to notice. She took the brick without a word. Maeve unfolded the thermal blanket. She wrapped a single piece around Yuna's legs over the 3 jackets. Yuna flinched at the touch. Then she froze. Then she relaxed. Maeve said that if she kept shivering all night, no one would get any sleep. That was her way of caring. Rough, direct, no questions asked. Sarah sat against the wall, jotting something down in a notebook. Inventory, medication usage, dosages. Her handwriting was small and neat. The handwriting of someone used to medical charts. Daniel looked at the 3 of them. 3 women, all more experienced in survival, all physically stronger, all abandoned. And all here for some reason with him. With a skinny analyst who could barely crawl and waved a knife around like a child. Because he knew where to go. That was the only reason. The screen flickered in the corner. Social layer, 3 markers. All green, bright green, honest cooperation, 0 hidden intentions. He closed the screen and lay on his back. The rock beneath his shoulder blades was warm. Relatively speaking. The black metal ceiling glistened in a dim blue light. This light had no source. It simply was like the screen of his briefing. Someone's technology, someone's legacy. An ancient civilization that built shelters and energy briquettes with a nutty flavor. Who were they? Where did they go? And why did they leave all this behind? But that doesn't matter now. What matters is that there will be a new briefing tomorrow morning, a new map, new routes. And he needs to get these 3 back to base. 100 kilometers. At their pace, that's 20 days. 20 briefings, day 3. 6 in the morning briefing. The map revealed a new problem. 5 kilometers south of their position, a group of 6 red markers was moving. Not monsters. People. Reds. Hostile intentions. They followed Daniel's intended route at 3 kilometers per hour, moving confidently in a disciplined search formation. They know where they're going. Daniel zoomed in. 6 people armed, moving in a wedge formation. A reconnaissance formation. They weren't just walking. They were searching. 5 kilometers between them and the hideout. At their speed. That's 4 hours. Leaving after 10 would place Daniel's group in the hostile squad's path. Around 12:30 that afternoon. 6 armed hunters against 4 wounded survivors meant certain defeat. So, Daniel tested a second what-if scenario. What would happen if we set out at 7 in the morning and headed southwest instead of south? The screen thought it over. The route would be 3 kilometers longer. Travel time would be 4 hours longer. But the red group would pass us by. The probability of a clash drops from 80% to 7%. Acceptable. He woke up the team. Sarah woke up immediately, quietly, without any unnecessary movements, a doctor's habit. Maeve opened her eyes and grabbed her spear. A fighter's habit. Yuna muttered something in Korean and pulled her hood down tighter. Daniel said they needed to leave earlier at 7. The route is changing to the southwest. Maeve asked why. He said it was the wind. The direction is changing. The packs will shift south. It's safer to go around them. That was half true. The packs were indeed shifting. But the main reason was the 6 red markers. Sarah was gathering medical supplies. Yuna was packing fuel briquettes. Maeve was distributing thermal blankets among the backpacks. They worked in silence without arguments. 3 days together, and they'd already found their rhythm. Everyone knew their role. They set out at 10:07, 10 minutes late. Yuna couldn't find her multi-tool. She found it in the pocket of her 3rd jacket. Daniel recalculated the time, a 10-minute delay. The routes were shifting. The corridor between the hound's pack and the iceworm zone was narrowing, but it was passable. They walked across the frozen plain. The wind blew in their faces. Fine ice crystals stung her skin. Yuna walked between Sarah and Maeve. A small figure in 3 jackets, head bowed, shoulder bandaged, but she kept walking. Didn't complain. An hour later, Maeve approached Daniel. She walked beside him silently. Then she said she'd seen tracks about 300 meters to the right. Fresh, a group, about 6 people, heavy boots, military. Daniel wasn't surprised. The red markers ran parallel exactly where the briefing had indicated. But Maeve had spotted their tracks without any briefing at all in the snow, a former firefighter. Observe it. He nodded, said he knew. That's why they were taking the southwest route. Maeve looked at him for a long time. Then she said she could accept the theory about the clouds. She could accept the theory about the wind. But if he knew about people he hadn't seen, then he either had a radio he was hiding or something else. And she'd like to know what. Daniel was silent. He walked. He counted his steps. Then he said he couldn't explain it yet, that he was asking her to trust him for a few more days. Maeve was silent for half a minute. Then she said he had a few days, but no more. They walked for 2 hours, 8 kilometers. For the wounded, that's a feat. Una sat down in the snow twice and got up on her own both times without help, teeth clenched. Pride, or stubbornness, or both. During a rest stop, Daniel checked the map. The red group had headed south. The distance between them was growing. The threat had passed, but the evening briefing revealed something new. A dot on the map 7 kilometers ahead. A player's body fresh. A marker nearby. Alive, green, fading. The person is dying. Daniel looked at the distance. 7 kilometers. They wouldn't make it there before dark. Not in their condition. He used his third and final what-if query. What would happen if we set up camp here and headed for the marker in the morning? The answer. The person at the marker would die during the night, probably 94%. The temperature will drop to -52. It's impossible to survive without shelter. Daniel closed his eyes. 94%. Someone will die tonight, 7 kilometers away from him. And there's nothing he can do about it, because 7 kilometers is a day and a half's journey for his group. He could go alone, traveling light without a backpack. 7 kilometers in 5 hours before nightfall, but has hit frostbite on his fingers. -52 at night. Daniel's probability of survival on a solo trek. The screen didn't show a number. The queries had ended, but he knew anyway, about 12%. Maybe less. Maeve noticed the look on his face. She came over, asked what was wrong. He said nothing was wrong, that they needed to set up camp. Maeve didn't believe him, but she didn't press the issue. They set up camp in a hollow between 2 boulders. They stretched thermal fabric over it like a tarp. Inside, it became bearable. -20. Sarah examined Una's wound. She said the antibiotics were working. The inflammation was subsiding. Una nodded. Then she suddenly said that she had a skill. Everyone turned to look at her. Una explained her system core was Category 2, not Category 3 like Daniel's. Her ability signal interception. She could pick up radio frequencies from the tundra, snippets of guild communications. Encrypted, but she's a hacker. She can decrypt some of it. She kept quiet until now because she didn't trust them. Now she does a little. Daniel looked at her. A hacker who can hear radio signals. His briefing provides the map. Her ability provides the context. Together, they're more than the sum of their parts. He nodded. He said it was very valuable. Una turned away, but the corner of her mouth twitched. Almost a smile. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay there thinking about the green marker 7 kilometers away. A person alive, still alive, will die by morning, and there's nothing he can do. It was a new feeling. In Seattle, he'd seen storm forecast and knew that someone might get hurt, but those were abstract numbers. Here it was a marker on the map, a specific point, a specific person, and he wouldn't save him. By 4 in the morning, the marker had gone dark. The screen displayed object inaccessible. Daniel closed his eyes. Object inaccessible. That's how the system signifies death. Day 4. 6 in the morning, briefing. New map. The spot where the marker had been was now just a cache. A player's body with untouched gear. Daniel plotted a route right through it. Don't go around it. Right through. If a person has died, their belongings will save the living. He didn't think of it as looting. He thought of it as a redistribution of resources, and made it easier that way. They reached the spot by noon. The body was lying in the snow face down. A young guy, maybe 20 years old, Korean. A system core around his neck. Category 3. The same level as Daniel's. He was wearing a good jacket, thermal boots, a backpack with food, a knife. A decent one, not army junk like Daniel's, and most importantly, a radio. Una took the radio. She turned it on. She scanned the frequencies. Her fingers moved quickly, confidently. A different person, not that timid girl in 3 jackets. She picked up a signal a minute later. Fragments of a conversation, the White Blade Guild. Maeve flinched. It was her former guild. Una listened. She translated. They were discussing a sector sweep, sending out a recovery team to collect gear from the bodies. 6 people, heavy weaponry. Withdrawal in 2 days. Daniel understood. The red markers he'd seen that morning. That was the White Blade recovery team. They weren't going in at random. They were going to collect gear from the bodies of their own abandoned fighters. From bodies like Maeve's, who had also been abandoned and marked as dead. Maeve was silent. Her face was like stone, white, motionless. Only her hands gripping the spear had turned white. Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder. She didn't say anything. She just put her hand there. Maeve exhaled slowly. Then she said they had to go. They took the dead man's gear. Daniel put on his jacket over his own. Una took the radio and the batteries. Maeve took the knife. Sarah took the medical supplies from his first aid kit. Daniel stood over the body. The guy was 20, maybe 19. He'd come to the tundra for money or for glory or because he had no choice, just like all of them. Just like everyone. He memorized the boy's face, promised himself he would remember it, and moved on. Day 4 evening. They covered 11 kilometers, a record, the new gear helped, a warm jacket, a good knife. Daniel felt almost human. His hips still ached, but ointment from the ancient containers was already restoring the frostbitten fingers. On his left hand, they set up camp in a small cave. A fire made from chemical briquettes, warmed light. Una tuned into the radio. Una intercepted 3 more transmissions from the Grey Asp, Sarah's former guild, revealing multiple sweep teams along their route. 3 teams of 4 people each. Their direction matched Daniel's group's route. Daniel looked at the map. Tomorrow's briefing would reveal their positions, but it was already clear. The path south to the base was blocked. The guilds were clearing their doctor. To them, any survivor from the abandoned groups isn't a person, a resource, a walking container of gear. We need a new route. Daniel closed his eyes. The map appeared before his mind's eye. 30 square kilometers to the south, the guilds. To the east, the packs. To the north, the ridge of silence beyond which the northern dawn had perished, 900 people. That leaves the west. A long detour through the ice fields. Day 5, 6 in the morning, briefing. The western route unfolded before him like a weather map. The ice fields stretched 12 kilometers between the rock massif and the first ridge of glacial hills. A flat surface, almost no cover. The wind sweeps freely across the plain. The temperature in open areas is 8 degrees lower than in the rocky sections. At night, -55. During the day, -37. Flux. The ice worms patrol the fields in groups of 3. Slow but resilient. Conventional weapons don't work well against them. Fire or acid is needed. The group has neither. The worms' routes are cyclical. They follow the same paths every 4 hours, like centuries. That's good. Predictability is what Daniel knows how to work with. He found windows. 3 corridors between patrols. The first from 8:05 to 9:40. The second from 11:20 to 1,000 to 110. The third from 3 in the afternoon to 1,530. Each window lasts from 40 minutes to an hour and a half. In each one, you can cover 1 and 12 to 3 kilometers if you move without stopping. You'll need cover between the windows. The screen showed 3 dots to ice mounds, ice hummocks large enough to hide for people, and 1 gap in the ice field. A crevasse 1 meters wide to meters deep. You can sit there, you can't lie down. He drew up a plan, calculated the timing. 8:05, exit 940, first ice hummock. Wait until 11:20. 12:20, 11:20. Exit 1,210. The crevasse. Wait until 300. Exit 330. Second ice hummock. Overnight camp. 12 kilometers a day. If everything goes exactly as planned, if no one falls behind, if the worms don't change the route. He explained the plan to the team. No map, no screen, just words. Route west, 3 crossings. 3 hideouts, exact times. Maeve listened and nodded. She was used to clear instructions. Fire department. Sarah jotted down the times in her notebook. Una watched him silently from under her hood. Maeve asked how he knew the worm's schedule. Daniel said that ice worms are cold-blooded in the literal sense. Their metabolism depends on temperature. At -37, ice worms moved roughly 2 kilometers per hour, following patrol cycles shaped by temperature. It can be calculated. Maeve looked at him. Then she said it sounded so convincing that it surely couldn't be true. But she'd go. Daniel allowed himself a smile, a small one, a quick one. His first in 5 days. 8:05. They stepped out onto the ice field. The wind hit them immediately, a wall of ice shards and cold. The temperature was -37, but with the wind it felt like -45. Una staggered. Sarah caught her by the elbow. Maeve walked ahead, a spear in her right hand, a knife on her belt. Her eyes scanned the horizon. A habit, one she couldn't shake. Daniel walked second, a screen before his eyes. Red lines marking patrol routes. The nearest worm was 2 kilometers away, moving northeast, right on schedule. They walked quickly, faster than usual. Open spaces do that to people. when there's nowhere to hide. Your legs pick up the pace on their own. 920, 1.5 kilometers covered. 800 meters to the first ice ridge. A 20-minute walk. The screen flashed. An anomaly. The worm on the northeastern east route has deviated. It's turned south. The new trajectory passes for 100 meters from their position. Estimated time of crossing, 9:35. 15 minutes from now. Daniel stopped. Maeve turned around. He said one word. Run. Maeve didn't ask why. She ran. Sarah grabbed Una by the arm and pulled her forward. Una stumbled, recovered, and ran as for wounded survivors dragged themselves across 800 meters of exposed ice. Daniel's thigh exploded with pain. The stitch on Maeve's leg burst open, blood on the snow. Una was gasping for breath. Only Sarah ran smoothly. Long legs, steady stride, endurance. She dragged Una along like a tugboat. 932, ice hummock, a 3 meters high block of ice. They collapsed behind it. All four of them, in a heap. Maeve clutched her leg. Una gasped for air. Daniel pressed his back against the ice and stared at the screen. The worm's red line passed 350 meters away from them. 936. For minutes to spare. He closed his eyes. For minutes. In another life, he would have said that was close. In the tundra, it was normal. They'd been huddled behind the ice hummock for 2 hours. Sarah rebandaged Maeve. The bleeding had stopped. The stitch could be fixed that evening. Una lay on her side, breathing slowly, heavily. 3 jackets weren't enough to keep out the wind in the open field. She was freezing. Really freezing. Daniel took off his second jacket, the one from the dead guy, and put it on Una. She opened her eyes and looked at him. He expected her to say something snarky like, "You don't need to," or that he'd freeze himself. But she just pulled the jacket on, closed her eyes, and said quietly, "Thank you, I jushy." 11:20, second window. They set off again, slower, more carefully. Daniel checked the screen every 30 seconds. Patrols on schedule, no more anomalies. 3 kilometers to the crack, a 50-minute walk. They'd been walking for 47. They made it with time to spare. A crack in the ice field. 1 meters wide to meters deep for people sat at the bottom. Knees to their chins, shoulder to shoulder, cramped, cold. But the wind is up above. It's quiet down here. 2 hours and 50 minutes to wait until the third window. Maeve sat next to Daniel, shoulder to shoulder, not out of tenderness, out of the cold. She turned her head quietly, so that Una and Sarah wouldn't hear. Although you can hear everything in a 1 meters wide crack. She said that he'd known again, that he'd ordered them to run a second before it became dangerous, and that she no longer believed in clouds or thermodynamics. Daniel was silent. Maeve said she didn't need to know how. She needed to know why. Why he was leading them. What he wanted from them. He turned toward her. Their faces were only 30 centimeters apart, and Maeve's gray eyes held exhaustion, honesty, and a question Daniel could not avoid. He told the truth partially. He said he had a source of information about the tundra. That he couldn't say exactly what it was. That it wasn't a radio or a connection to the guilds. That he didn't need anything from them. That he was leading them to the base because he couldn't make it there alone. It was easier together. That was all. Maeve listened. Then she said, "All right, a source of information, fine. But if that source ever told him to abandon one of them for the sake of survival, what would he do?" Daniel answered without hesitation. He said he'd shut it off. Maeve looked at him for 5 seconds. Then she nodded. She said she believed him and turned away. On the other hand, Sarah pretended not to hear. Una pretended to be asleep. Both of them heard everything. 3 in the afternoon, third window, 30 minutes, the shortest 1 to kilometers. To the second snowdrift they needed speed. They ran not a run, a fast limping stride, but for wounded men. It was a run, counted the minutes. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. While the next ice hummock remained 1 brutal kilometer away. The patrols are far away. 1,528 ice hummock. They stumbled into its shadow. 2 minutes to spare. Daniel sat down in the snow. His thigh didn't hurt. He'd simply lost all feeling in it. That's worse than pain. Pain means the nerves are working. Numbness means the tissue is giving out. Sarah examined his leg silently. Then she took out some ointment from the ancient containers. She applied it, bandaged it. Said he needed a day of rest at least. He replied that tomorrow they'd reach the glacial hills. There was shelter there. They could stop there for a day. She nodded, didn't argue. Doctors don't argue when they know a patient won't listen. They assess the situation and do what they can. The camp of the second ice hummock, thermal fabric, fuel briquettes. A warm broth made from civilization powder. 12 kilometers of ice field behind us alive. All 4 of us. In the evening, Una picked up a new signal. Not the guild, an open frequency, a voice, male, young, a looping recording. He kept repeating the same thing. Coordinates and words. If anyone is listening, there are 4 of us. We're on the northern slope of the glacial ridge. We ran out of food 2 days ago. One of us is injured. If anyone is listening, please. Yuna looked up at Daniel. Coordinates. He checked the map. 17 kilometers northwest far. Today's journey. But the direction matches almost. 4 of us. For more wounded, hungry, abandoned. He looked at his team. At Maeve, who was cleaning her knife. At Sarah, who was counting the medical supplies. At Yuna, who was holding the radio and looking at him with expectant eyes. He could have walked right past them. 17 kilometers was a detour to extra days. An unnecessary risk. His mission was to get these 3 back to base, not to save the whole world. But Yuna was looking at him, and Maeve looked up, and Sarah stopped counting. Everyone was waiting. He said the route would change slightly. They would go via the northern slope. Maeve asked why. He pointed to the radio. She had heard the recording. Maeve smiled. She said something about hot cocoa and saving strangers. Day 6. 6 in the morning. Briefing. Daniel couldn't move. His hip had swollen up overnight. His knee wouldn't bend. Sarah examined him in the dark. She said he needed a day of rest, not a recommendation, a demand. If he went today, the tissue would start to die. He looked at the map. The glacial hills were 4 kilometers away. Between them and the hills was a single iceworm patrol. The window was from 9:20 to 11, an hour and a half. Enough for the group, but not for him. Not today. He said he was staying behind, that Maeve would lead the group to the hills. There was cover there. He'd catch up tomorrow. Maeve looked at him as if he were an idiot, slowly, expressively. Then she said one word, no. Sarah agreed. She said the group was staying. All or none. Yuna under 3 jackets, and his 4th muttered something in Korean. Then she translated. She said he'd said yesterday that he couldn't make it alone. So let him not be alone. Daniel closed his mouth, opened it, closed it again. 3 women he'd known for 5 days, to whom he couldn't even tell the truth, and they refused to leave without him. He lay back down on the thermal blanket. He said it was fine. A day off? Maeve nodded. She picked up a spear. She said she'd go check the perimeter. Sarah opened the first aid kit. She began changing the bandage on his thigh. Her hands were warm, steady. A doctor through and through. Yuna turned on the radio. She scanned the frequencies. She was working. A day off didn't mean idleness. Maeve returned an hour later. She dragged in some chunks of ice with some kind of specks in them. She tossed them next to Sarah. She said she'd found them on an ice ridge. They looked like frozen algae. Sarah examined them. She sniffed it. She licked it cautiously. Then she said it was ether moss. It grows near frost ether crystals. It's not edible, but it's used in medicine as an antiseptic. A powerful one. Daniel looked at the screen. The map showed a weak ether anomaly in the area of the ice hummock. He hadn't noticed it yesterday. Small, not dangerous, but an indicator that there's ether nearby. He told Maeve she was an excellent tracker. Maeve snorted. She said it wasn't tracking. It was a firefighter's reflex to check the perimeter to look for something on fire. Nothing's burning here, but the habit remains. Noon. Yuna picked up a news signal, not a recording. A live voice. A response from the 4 on the northern slope. A man's voice. Young, shaky. He said he'd heard their reply. That they were holding out. That the wounded woman was stable. That they had shelter but no food and almost no water. And that there was something strange near them. A structure made of black metal built into the slope. They hadn't gone inside. They were afraid. Daniel froze. Black metal like the hideout where they'd found the containers. Ancient civilization, a structure on the northern slope. He looked at the map. The briefing hadn't shown anything at that location too far away. Beyond 30 kilometers, a gray area. But if the 4 of them say the structure is there, then it is. And if it's made of that same black metal, there might be containers inside, food, medicine, maybe weapons, maybe something more. He asked Yuna to relay the message. Don't enter the structure. Wait, they'll be there in 2 days. Yuna relayed the message. The voice on the other end fell silent. Then it said one word. Thank you. And the connection was lost. The battery was on their end. Daniel lay there thinking. A structure from a civilization, a large one built into the hillside. This isn't a supply cache. Caches are small. The earlier cache had been only a 3x4-meter room. But this hillside structure belonged to an entirely different scale. Maybe a residential complex or a laboratory or something he can't yet imagine. And it's not on his map. The briefing was limited to 30 kilometers. Beyond that lay fog. He was used to precision. To numbers, to percentages. Venturing into the fog was scary. But for people were waiting, and the structure was waiting. Day 6, evening. His hip was better. The ancient civilization ointment was working. Sarah examined him and said they could walk tomorrow slowly. But we could. Maeve had been walking around the tour all day, gathering ether moss. She brought back to full sacks. Sarah processed some of it into an antiseptic paste. She packed the rest. It would come in handy on the northern slope. Una had been listening to the frequencies all day. By evening, she'd compile the list. For guilds within range: White Blade, Grey Asp, Southern Hammer, and one more, a major one: Black Whale. Una said that the Black Whale's signals were encrypted differently, more complex, military grade. She can't fully decrypt them, only fragments. Words, analyst, source, Sector 3 search. Daniel felt a chill. Not from the temperature, from the words analyst, source. They're looking for someone. Maybe not him. There are many analysts in the tundra. Many sources. But maybe it's him. 5 days. He's been in the tundra for 5 days. Who could have found out about him in 5 days? He saved Maeve, found the hideout, led the group across the ice field. Nothing public. No witnesses except for the 3 women nearby. But Pine Harpoon knows he's alive, unless they've marked him as dead. If the commander who abandoned the team reported that one rookie might have survived, a meteorological analyst with a 3rd category system core, not valuable information. But Black Whale collects everything. Una said she'd keep listening. That night, the temperature fell to -51 outside, while their shelter held at a barely survivable -23. Morning will tell. Night, 51 behind the ice wall. Inside the shelter, it's -23. Thermal fabric, briquettes, body heat. For people in a small space, Maeve lay to Daniel's right. Sarah was on his left. Una was across from him, curled up in a ball. In the darkness, only quiet breathing and the crackling of ice outside. Maeve turned quietly. She whispered, asking him if he was asleep. He said no. She was silent for a moment. Then she said she wanted to tell him about her brother. His name is Liam. He's 14. He has autism. He attends a special school in Boston. It's a good school, an expensive one. She paid for it out of her firefighter salary. Then her salary stopped being enough. Tundra pays 10 times as much. She signed a 1-year contract. She promised Liam she'd come back. He didn't understand. He doesn't understand the word year. For him, there's now and not now for him. She's been in the not now category for 2 months already. And every day of this not now feels like the first to him. Every morning he looks for her in the boarding school hallway. Every morning he doesn't find her. And every morning it's a new kind of pain. Not because he's getting used to it. Because he can't get used to it. She fell silent. Daniel lay there quietly. Then he said his mom was in the hospital in Seattle. Cancer. Insurance doesn't cover it. He's here for the same reason. Money. Just money. Maeve gave a quiet chuckle. She said they were both here for people who don't even know they're here. He said that's probably the definition of family. Maeve was silent. Then she said, "Go to sleep, meteorologist. Tomorrow we have to go see for more idiots who are also someone's family." He closed his eyes. The screen dimmed. Tomorrow's briefing in 5 hours. A new map, new routes, new numbers. But right now, there was only silence. The sound of someone else's breathing nearby. And the warmth of Maeve's shoulder through 2 layers of thermal fabric. Day 7, 6 in the morning, briefing. The map had been updated. Glacial hills for kilometers away. Beyond them began the ascent to the northern slope flocks. The ice worms had headed south. The area was clear until noon. The only threat, a snowstorm, not a creature, a real storm, an ethereal one. The weather report showed a front approaching from the northeast. The ether storm would arrive at 4 in the afternoon, last 8 hours, and drive winds beyond 40 meters per second. Temperature -62 at the epicenter. And most importantly, within the ether storm zone. The briefing system doesn't work. The screen goes dark. The map disappears. He goes blind. Daniel felt his stomach clench. 8 hours without the system. 8 hours as an ordinary person at -62. He looked at the calculations. If they left now, 600. For kilometers to the hills, 2 hours. Then the climb up the slope 6 kilometers for hours. By noon they'd be halfway to the 4. The storm would hit at 4. They needed shelter until 4. Ancient civilization structure 17 kilometers from the starting point. He did the math, 17 kilometers in 10 hours. Impossible for the group. It's possible for healthy legs. Not for them. They needed an intermediate waypoint. He looked at the map. Hills. There are caves in them. 3 of them within reach. The closest cave waited 9 kilometers away. And reaching it by 1 in the afternoon left 3 hours before the storm. Daniel chose that shelter. woke the team, and explained that the ether storm would strike at 4 in the afternoon. They needed to cover 9 kilometers before 1. So Maeve rose immediately while Sarah packed every medical supply. Una turned off the radio to save the battery. They set out at 6:20. The field was empty. No worms, no hounds, just the wind and a gray void. It took them an hour and a half to cover the 4 kilometers to the hills. Fast, Maeve set the pace. Tough, almost brutal, but everyone understood. The storm wouldn't wait. The hills met them with their stone teeth. Gray, icy, covered in frost. Passes between them, narrow. The wind was weaker here. The walls dampened it. The temperature was 3 degrees higher, -34. They set off down the passage between the hills. Daniel led the way. The route climbed 5 kilometers at a 12-degree incline, turning a simple ascent into a brutal test for the wounded. At 11 in the morning, Una fell. She just sat down in the snow. Her legs gave out. Sarah caught her. Una said everything was fine, just her legs. She was just tired. It was just that 3 jackets weighed as much as a 4th person. Maeve approached silently. She took the backpack from Una. She slung it over her free shoulder. A spear in her right hand. 2 backpacks on her left shoulder. The cut on her shin was bleeding, and she walked on as if nothing had changed. By 12:30, they reached a dry cave, collapsed onto the rock, and finally escaped the approaching ether storm. The entrance was between 2 rock outcrops. It was dry inside, 8 meters deep, 4 meters wide, 3 meters high. A decent shelter. They went inside. They collapsed, all 4 of them, on the rock, on the thermal blanket. It didn't matter. They just collapsed. 9 kilometers, 6 hours. For wounded people, it was a forced march. Sarah was the first to get up. Sarah checked everyone, then found Maeve's stitches torn open again and immediately restitched the bleeding wound. Her legs were rubbed raw. Daniel, his hip was stable. The ointment was working, but the frostbite on the fingers of his left hand is getting worse. His little finger is white. Sarah looked at his little finger for a long time. Then she said that if it didn't warm up in 2 days, it would have to be amputated. Daniel looked at his little finger. White, numb. The little finger of his left hand. He's left-handed. He needs his little finger for gripping, for typing, to hold a mug of hot cocoa. The little finger. A small loss by tundra standards. People lost legs here, arms, lives. A little finger is nothing. But for him, it's the first part of his body that the tundra might take away forever. He said he understood. Sarah nodded. She wrapped his finger in ether moss. Maeve approached. She looked at his hand. Then silently she took off her glove, warm, intact, and slipped it onto his left hand. He started to say it wasn't necessary. She said she had the hands, both of which worked, while he was already missing one, and that if he lost a finger, he wouldn't be able to count to 10. And for a meteorologist, that's critical. He looked at her. She wasn't smiling, but her eyes were smiling. Una from the corner of the cave quietly said that she also had spare gloves in the pocket of her 3rd jacket. She took them out and handed them to Maeve. Mittens, whereupon pink with kittens. Maeve looked at the mittens, then at Una. Then she put them on. Pink mittens with kittens on the hands of a former firefighter with a broken spear in an icy cave. Sarah made a sound, a quiet one. Something between a chuckle and a sob. The first non-medical sound she'd made in all this time. Daniel watched the 3 of them. Maeve in her mittens with kittens. Una, who for the first time had willingly given someone something of her own. Sarah, who almost laughed. 5 days ago, he had been lying alone in the snow with 2%. Now he was sitting in a cave. At 3 in the afternoon, the sky darkened above 3 survivors who had already surrendered their last supplies to one another. At 3:30, the first gust of wind lashed against the cliffs. By 4 in the afternoon, the storm had engulfed the hills. A howl, a roar, a sound like a train rushing by a meter from his head. The cave shook. Small stones rained down from the ceiling. The thermal fabric at the entrance tore from its fastenings. Maeve held it in place with her hands. Pink mittens on the rocks. Daniel's screen flickered. Once, twice it went dark. The ether storm was shutting down the system. He was blind. For the first time in 5 days, he couldn't see the map. He couldn't see the routes. He couldn't see the markers. He didn't know what was outside. He didn't know what would happen in an hour. Just an ordinary person, skinny, with a sore leg, with a frozen finger, without a single advantage. Fear didn't come right away. At first, there was emptiness, like a monitor turned off, then silence inside, then realization. 8 hours. No information, no forecast, no percentages. He didn't know from which direction the threat would come, didn't know if it would come at all. Didn't know anything. Maeve turned around. She saw his face. She walked over, sat down next to him, placed her hand on his shoulder. Heavy, warm through the mitten with the kitten on it. She said she knew about storms, that Boston gets nor'easters, that once she and her crew had sat in the basement for 12 hours while a hurricane tore off roofs. That had all passed, and this would pass, too. He nodded. Not because he'd calmed down, because she was there. And Sarah was there, and Una was there, too. 3 dots he couldn't see on the blackened screen, but he could feel them. The storm howled for 8 hours. They didn't sleep. They sat there. They waited. Maeve told a story about a fire at the Boston harbor. How they put out a fire at a fish warehouse and then smelled like salmon for a week. Una quietly said that in Korea salmon is expensive and smell like salmon is almost a status symbol. Maeve laughed. Sarah told them how in Minnesota she treated a farmer who came in with an axe in his shoulder and said he'd come for a note for his insurance. Una asked if he'd gotten the note. Sarah said he had and a recommendation not to chop wood while intoxicated. At midnight, the storm subsided. The wind died. Silence crashed down like a wall. After 8 hours of howling, the silence was deafening. Daniel waited a minute. 5:10. At 12:13, the screen flashed. Blue light, familiar. Home, system restored. Emergency map update, data for the missed period. Day 8, 6 in the morning. Briefing. The 3-day window has been confirmed. Not a single red line from the flocks within a 15 kilometers radius. The storm swept the area clean like a broom. The route to the northern slope is clear. 8 kilometers through the hills. The ascent ranged from 7 to 14 degrees, while the post-storm temperature rose to a merciful -26. Straight, no detours. For the first time in a week, they can walk without zigzagging between patrols. Just walk, he told the team. Maeve nodded. She stood up. She rewrapped the bandage on her shin. Sarah had stitched it up for the 3rd time yesterday. She said there wouldn't be a 4th. The fabric won't hold. Maeve replied that it meant there wouldn't be a need for a 4th. You'd check the radio. The battery was at 20%. Conserve power. Don't turn it on until we make contact with Team 4. They set out at 7. The hills looked different after the storm. The snow lay in fresh layers. Smooth, untouched. No tracks, no creatures, no people. The silence was so deep she could hear her own pulse in her ears. Maeve walked ahead, a spear slung over her shoulder. Pink mittens with seals on them. She hadn't taken them off. She was used to them, or maybe she liked them. Daniel didn't ask. Una walked beside Sarah. Something had changed after the storm. Una no longer pulled away when Sarah took her by the arm. She didn't flinch at the touch. 8 hours in the dark alongside people who told funny stories instead of panicking. That's what made a difference. It broke down some kind of wall, or at least punched a hole in it. By noon, they'd walked 6 kilometers, a good pace. Daniel's thigh was working. The ointment of civilization was doing its job. His little finger was still white, but Sarah said the amputation was on hold. The ether moss and the warmth of Maeve's glove had slowed the process, not stopped it, just slowed it a few more days. At 2 in the afternoon, Daniel saw for green markers on the map, clear and distinct. They had entered the 30-kilometer zone. The data had become accurate for people all alive, all stationary. Next to them was a marker for a structure, large. The system had flagged it as an ancient civilization structure. The scale was significantly larger than the container cache, an underground structure. Estimated depth 12 meters. Area unknown. Daniel stopped. He looked at the data. 12 meters underground. This isn't a storage room. It's a complex. He didn't tell the team. The structure waited 2 kilometers away, and at 3 in the afternoon, 8 abandoned survivors finally met outside its entrance. For figures at the entrance to the slope, the entrance was framed by black metal, an arch 3 meters high. The same material as in the hideout, but on a different scale. For people stood in front of the arch watching Daniel's group approach. The first one, a tall guy, broad-shouldered, Asian features, short haircut. His arms were bandaged up to his elbows. He stood in front of the others, shielding them with his body, just as Sarah had shielded Una during their first meeting. The second one, a shorter guy, red-haired, freckles, heavy breathing. His eyes darted around, nervous, but holding his ground. Third, a girl, petite, skinny, one shoulder bandaged, standing slightly behind the others. In her hand, a homemade knife made from a piece of metal tied to a stick. Fourth, a girl, red-headed like the second guy. They look alike, brother and sister. She stood straight, calm, her eyes appraising, cold, a professional gaze. The screen showed for green markers, all clear. Cooperation. Daniel raised his hands, palms open. He said they'd come in response to a radio signal. The tall guy looked at him, then at Maeve with the spear, at Sarah, at Una, for wounded people. They didn't look like a threat. He lowered his shoulders, exhaled, said his name was Tom Nakamura. 25 years old. Northern Shield Guild, abandoned 3 weeks ago on a long-distance route. The red-haired guy. Finn Carter, 23 years old. A survival instructor in his past life. His sister, Ashley Carter, 25 years old. Also an instructor, also Northern Shield. A petite girl with a homemade knife. Park Min-soo, 19 years old, Korean sniper. Southern Hammer Guild. The same one as Yuna's. Yuna looked at Min-soo. Min-soo looked at Yuna. They didn't know each other. Southern Hammer is a large guild, but something flashed between them. Recognition, not of faces, of situations. Both had been abandoned by the same people. Ashley Carter stepped forward. She looked at Daniel directly, appraisingly. She asked who he was and why he had come. He said he was Daniel Kim, a meteorologist. They'd heard the distress signal and changed course. Ashley raised an eyebrow. She said that meteorologists don't usually wander through the tundra. With a team of wounded women rescuing strangers, Maeve stepped up beside Daniel. She thrust her spear into the snow. She said that this meteorologist had led them across the ice field in a week, through the worm patrols, through the ether storm without any casualties. And if Ashley liked sitting at the entrance to the slope and waiting until the food ran out, then by all means, but they'd be moving on. Ashley looked at Maeve, then at Daniel, then she smirked. She said she liked this redhead with the spear. Maeve said she wasn't a redhead, dark brown hair, just dirty. Tom Nakamura chuckled quietly. Probably the first laugh in 3 weeks. A black metal arch opened into a corridor 3 meters wide and 4 meters high, glowing with sourceless blue light. A blue light with no visible source, the same as in the hideout, but brighter. The walls were smooth. The floor was even, no dust, no ice. The temperature inside was -2, almost above zero. The corridor spiraled 12 meters underground before opening into a massive hall, measuring 15 by 20 meters. The ceiling was 6 meters high. Daniel stopped at the entrance. 8 pairs of eyes were watching the hall. Containers, dozens of them, shelving units along the walls, 3 closed doors made of black metal. And in the center of the hall stood a pillar. 1 meter tall, thin, made of the same metal. At its top, a blue screen, small, the size of a palm. Off. Daniel felt his own screen flicker. It flashed. A line scrolled across the bottom edge. Ancient civilization network node detected. Connection possible. Expansion of the briefing zone. Temporary for the duration of his stay within a 50 meters radius of the node. New map radius 50 kilometers. 50 instead of 30. He froze. 50 kilometers. That changed everything. Greater coverage. More data. More flock routes. More hideouts. More people. He walked over to the pole. The screen at the top flashed. The terminal flashed blue. Recognized Daniel as an operator. And displayed the previous operator's identifier, M. That single letter belonged to the mysterious user, whose warnings had appeared inside Daniel's briefing logs. One surviving warning ordered future operators to avoid Sector 7, because something there could listen through the ether. A month before the Northern Dawn was lost. Meanwhile, the team was opening the containers. Maeve and Tom were working together. Heavy lids, it takes 2 pairs of hands. Food. Lots of food. Bricks, different ones. Not the nutty ones. They taste like something meat-like. Higher calorie content. 500 units per briquette. Medications. 3 containers. Sarah opened them and fell silent for a moment. Then she said quietly that there were enough antibiotics here to stock an entire hospital. Regenerative ointments, painkillers, and something she couldn't identify. A blue liquid in clear vials, unlabeled. Daniel checked it through the system. The screen displayed an ancient civilization regenerative stimulant. Accelerates healing 3-fold. Side effects. Drowsiness, possibly hunger. Definitely. Compatibility with human biology, 87%. 13% unknown reactions. He told Sarah that the blue liquid might be a regenerator. That he'd read about something similar in the reports of the ancient civilization researchers. A beautiful one. Sarah looked at him. She nodded. She said she'd test it on herself. A small dose. Maeve said she wouldn't take it herself. That it was better to test it on her. Sarah replied that she was a doctor, and she was the one who decided. Maeve opened her mouth, closed it, then said that doctors were worse than commanders. At least commanders didn't pretend to care. For the first time ever, Sarah gave Maeve a sharp look. Then she relaxed. She said, a small dose on a scratch. They'd see the reaction. She applied a drop of blue liquid to a cut on her wrist. A small one, harmless. 10 minutes later, the cut had closed, clean. No scar. Sarah looked at her wrist, then at the vial, then at Daniel. She said quietly that this changed everything. He nodded. A regenerator. Wounds that would take weeks to heal would close in days. Daniel's pinky. Maeve's stitches. Yuna's shoulder. Minsu's shoulder, Tom's hands. All their injuries, all their losses could be fixed. Sarah worked until nightfall. She treated everyone, Daniel's pinky, a drop of regenerator. An hour later, the color began to return from white to pink slowly but noticeably. Sarah said the amputation was off. Daniel looked at his little finger turning pink alive. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. That night, they slept in the hall, 8 peepliest degrees, after -50. It felt like a warm house. Ashley Carter sat down next to Daniel quietly when the others had fallen asleep. She said she was a survival instructor. 10 years of experience, 2 years in the tundra. She knows the tundra, knows how to read the snow and ice, how to set up camp, how to determine the thickness of the surface. But she doesn't know how he does what he does. Daniel remained silent. Ashley said she didn't need his secret. She needed to know one thing. Could she trust him? He said that he could. She nodded. She said that in that case she would teach his team how to survive. Because a source of information is good, but survival skills are what remain when the source falls silent, like during a storm. He looked at her red head, freckles, straightforward eyes, no guile, no hidden agenda. A professional. She wasn't offering friendship, a partnership. He agreed. Ashley stood up. She said she'd start with the basics in the morning. How to place your foot on the ice correctly. How to distribute the weight of your backpack. Day 9-6 in the morning, briefing. Daniel's first move was to look at the white marker. It had shifted 3 kilometers to the northwest. Moving slowly, but it's moving. Not a pack. Not a group. A lone figure. The system still marked it as unidentified. No explanation. He pushed the white marker aside. Mentally, there are more important tasks. 8 people, the underground complex, supplies, 3 days without predators. He needed to make use of this time. He unfolded the map completely. 50 kilometers. This was the first time he'd seen Outpost 12. To the southwest. 43 kilometers, the nearest point of civilization. A border trading post, guilds, stores, a connection to the outside world. A route through open fields and to mountain passes. Estimated travel time, 12 days for a group of 8, taking the wounded into account. Taking into account the packs that would return in a day. He mapped out the route day by day, every leg of the journey, every shelter, every window between patrols. Daniel spent all 3 what-if scenarios before noon. First, confirming that the group could sustain only 3 kilometers per hour. Minsu and Yuna won't be able to keep up any faster. Second, the most dangerous section of the route. Answer, the pass between 2 ridges on the 6th day of the journey. A pack of snowhounds crosses it twice a day. The window between crossings is 40 minutes. We need to cover 2 kilometers in 40 minutes uphill. Third, are there other groups of survivors on the route? Answer, yes, 3 groups. 2 groups of 2. 1 group of 5. All within a 10 kilometers radius of the route. All marked green. 12 people. Daniel closed the screen. He looked up at the ceiling of the hall. 12 people, 12 more. If they gathered everyone, a group of 20 would arrive at the base. 20 people isn't just a group of survivors anymore. It's a squad. Safety in numbers. But problems in numbers too. More people means slower progress, more food, more conflicts. A greater chance that someone isn't a rookie. He went down to the hall. The team was already awake. Ashley was standing in the center explaining to Yuna how to lace her boots properly in the cold. Yuna listened with the expression of someone being told the obvious. But she was listening because her feet were frostbitten and she really was lacing her boots incorrectly. Maeve and Tom were unpacking the containers. They were taking inventory, distributing supplies among the backpacks. Maeve was in charge. Tom was following orders without objection. He was the type who was used to following good orders, and Maeve's orders were good. Minsu sat in the corner. She was cleaning her homemade knife, quiet, attentive. Her eyes were downcast, but her ears were alert. She heard everything Daniel had already noticed. Minsu had the hearing of a cat, every rustle, every whisper, a sniper, accustomed to silence and observation. Finn was standing by one of the closed doors. He was tapping it with his knuckles. Listening to the echo, Daniel approached. Finn said there was emptiness behind the door, a large void. The sound carried far away. Maybe another room or a hallway or something else. Daniel looked at the door. The screen marked it as a restricted sector. Access limited. Requires a higher clearance level than the current one. He didn't try. Not now. Sarah approached. Morning rounds. His little finger pink sensation is returning. The regenerator is working. Maeve's suture closed clean. Sarah removed the stitches. Maeve took a step, crouched down, stood up. Said her leg felt like new. Almost. Yuna's shoulder healed. Minsu. His shoulder is healing. 2 more days. Tom's hands burns. The regenerator sped up the process, but the burns are deep. A week at least. Sarah reported the summary to Daniel as a doctor to the commander. He didn't ask her to. She just started because order had emerged in the group. No orders. No hierarchy. Just Daniel would say where to go, and everyone would follow because he was right every time. Daniel gathered everyone. 8 people in the Hall of Civilization. He laid out the plan. 12 days journey to Outpost 12. The route goes through the hills and to Mountain Passes. The 3-day window away from the predators ends tomorrow. Then the packs will return. They'll have to proceed with caution. He said that along the route there were 3 other groups of survivors. 12 people, and that he wanted to join them. Silence. Tom said that 20 people was too many. There wouldn't be enough food. Daniel said there would be enough. The supplies from the complex will cover it. 240 rations to per person per day. 20 days for 20 people, just barely, but it'll be enough. Ashley said that 20 people mean noise, slowness, a target. He agreed. He said that's exactly why they needed a survival instructor. Someone who could teach 20 people to move like 4. Ashley looked at him, then she smirked. She said he was good at shifting the blame. Maeve said that was his talent. Minsu quietly raised her hand. Everyone turned to look at her. She whispered. Her voice was always a whisper. She said she had a reason to be here. That her older brother, Park Junho, had died in the tundra for months ago. That she had come to find his body. That she wouldn't leave until she found it. Silence. Yuna looked at Minsu, then at Daniel. Daniel looked at the map. The system was marking the bodies of the deceased. Within a 50 kilometers radius, there were 11 of them. He didn't know which one was Park Junho. The system doesn't show names, only coordinates and status. But he could narrow down the search. For months ago, a Korean player, a specific sector. He told Minsu he'd help with the search. That his weather data included information on movements from the past few months. A lie. But it was necessary. Minsu looked up, dark. What? She wasn't crying. Her eyes had just gotten wet. She nodded. She didn't say anything. She lowered her head and continued sharpening the knife. They spent 2 days at the complex. Rest. Recovery. Preparation. Ashley taught the group every morning, 2 hours. How to walk on ice. How to distribute your weight. How to breathe in the cold. How to pitch a tent in 3 minutes. Basic skills. The ones the guilds taught for money and poorly. Ashley taught them for free and well. On the 2nd day, Yuna approached Daniel quietly when no one was listening. She said she cracked part of the Black Whale code. Not all of it, 10%. Black Whale was hunting one specific man in his early 20s. Somewhere inside the same 3rd sector Daniel occupied. A specific one, a man in his early 20s. The 3rd sector area. The 3rd sector is where they are right now. Daniel felt a chill, a familiar one, not from the temperature. They're looking for him. Black Whale. The largest information guild in the tundra. They're looking specifically for him. Yuna said there was something else. A name that's come up in negotiations. Park. Someone with the last name Park is leading the search. Park, a Korean surname, a common one. But in the context of Black Whale and the intelligence division, Helen Park. He knew that name from the briefings they. Training records identified Helen Park as a former CIA analyst and the leader of Black Whale Intelligence, the woman who turned the guild into an intelligence network, the most dangerous intelligence operative in the tundra, and she's looking for him. Daniel sat down on a shipping container. He looked at his hands, skinny with scraped knuckles, a pinkish little finger, the hands of a meteorologist, not a warrior, not a spy, not a player. Helen Park is looking for these hands. Because somehow these hands lead people through the tundra without any losses. And that has attracted attention. Yuna asked what to do. He said nothing new. Head to the base. Gather people. Don't draw attention and hope that Black Whale is searching in the wrong sector. Yuna said that hope is a bad strategy. He agreed. So that for now that's all they've got. Day 11. Leaving the complex. 8 people. Backpacks full. 8 days worth of food, medications, regenerator, thermal fabric. Maeve carried a spear and 2 knives. Tom carried the heaviest backpack without a single complaint. Ashley checked every backpack. She redistributed the weight, removed the excess, added what was needed, a pro. Minsu walked last, quietly, eyes on the horizon, a sniper's habit, looking into the distance. Yuna walked beside Minsu. 2 Korean women, silent but walking side by side. Daniel was in front, a screen before his eyes. A map, 50 kilometers. Outside the complex, the radius began to narrow back down to 30. Slowly. Like a battery running out of charge. In an hour, it would be 45. In 3 hours, 40. By evening, 35. Tomorrow. Back to 30. A temporary expansion, but he remembered what he'd seen: the flock's locations, routes. Groups of survivors, the white marker. The first group of survivors, two people, a man and a woman, for kilometers west of the route. They found a man in his 30s with a broken arm and a woman in her mid-20s, suffering facial frostbite. They found them at noon. A man in his 30s, broken arm, a woman in her mid-20s, frostbite on her face. Both from the White Blade Guild, both abandoned. Maeve looked at the white blade patches on their jackets, her former guild. The man recognized Maeve. He said everyone thought she was dead. That command had written off her entire squad. Maeve silently handed him a water flask. Then she nodded to Sarah. Sarah stepped forward. A splint on his arm, ointment on his face. 10 people, day 12. The second group, 2 more. A guy and a girl, both young, 20, 21. The Grey Asp Guild. Sarah looked at their insignia. Her former guild. Same story. Abandoned. Written off. Forgotten. 12 people, day 13, third group, 5 people. 3 men, 2 women. All from different guilds. They'd come together a week ago. They'd been surviving on grass and melted snow. One was on the verge of exhaustion. Sarah got him back on his feet in half an hour. Regenerator. Food, warmth, 17 people. Daniel led them through the hills. The screen displayed the routes, windows, shelters. 17 people meant noise and slowness, but Ashley was on the job. She divided everyone into groups of 4. Each group of 4 knew its position in the formation, its timing, its task, military precision. Civilians were learning in a matter of hours what the military takes weeks to master. Because the motivation was simple: learn or die. Minsu brought up the rear. Her homemade knife had been replaced with a real one, taken from the complex's containers. A short blade made of black metal from ancient civilization times. Lighter than steel, sharper than steel. She held it the way other people hold an extension of their own arm. But Minsu didn't need a knife. Daniel had not revealed the hidden weapons cache yet, because the perfect moment to surprise Minsu had not arrived. He hadn't told her, not yet. On the evening of the 13th day, he sat by the campfire and counted. 17 people, 43 kilometers to the base. Supplies were sufficient. The route was mapped out. The packs were predictable. Black Whale was far away for now. Everything was going according to plan, too much so. He knew from his experience as a meteorologist, when the forecast is perfect, it means the model isn't accounting for something important. He looked at the map, a white marker. It was getting closer, 32 kilometers. Yesterday, it was 41. It was moving in their direction slowly but steadily. Uncertain. Whoever it was, he or she knew where to go. Daniel closed the screen. He looked at the fire. Maeve was sitting next to him. She was mending backpack strap. Her hands in pink mittens with seals on them moved deftly. She didn't take them off even by the fire. He thought he should tell her about Black Whale, about Helen Park, about the white marker, about everything. But not now. There were 17 people around the campfire who believed he knew what he was doing. If he told the truth that the largest guild in the tundra was hunting them, that something undefined was approaching them, that he had no idea what the white mark was, panic would destroy everything. He chose silence. As always, a meteorologist doesn't panic. The meteorologist reads the data, interprets it, makes a forecast, takes action. Panic is for those who can't read a map. He can. It's just that the map is getting more and more complicated. Day 14. 6 in the morning. Briefing. Problem. The pass, that very one. The most dangerous section of the route. The 6th day of the journey from the complex. The pack of snowhounds crosses it twice a day. The window between crossings is 40 minutes. Yesterday it was 2 days. Now, Daniel stood in front of it staring at the numbers. 17 people, a 2 kilometers climb. 40 minutes. Impossible. For a group of 4, it would be difficult. For 17, it's suicide. He used his first what-if query. Split the group into 3, 5, 6, 6. Send them through the pass in 3 waves between the morning and afternoon crossings. Response: the first group gets through. The second group gets through. The third doesn't make it. The flock returns earlier than expected. Margin of error: 15 minutes. Daniel stared at the word margin of error. The system forecast with an accuracy of 15 minutes. But 15 minutes at the pass is a matter of life and death. Second query: is there an alternative route? Answer: yes, through a gorge for kilometers to the east. It takes an extra day. But the packs don't go into the gorge. It's too narrow for them. Third query: what's in the gorge? Answer: ice worms. 2. Hibernating. The temperature in the gorge is 54. Too cold even for the worms. They're in hibernation until it warms up. But if a group of 17 passes through the gorge, the vibration of their footsteps, body heat, breathing might wake them up. Probability of awakening if 17 people pass through 61%. Daniel closed the screen. 2 routes, the mountain pass, 40 minutes. The third group won't make it in time. The gorge, the sleeping worms, 61% chance they'll wake up. Both options are bad. He sat down on a rock. He thought the screen was off. 3 queries used up. Only his brain remained. A meteorologist's brain. He thought about the vibrations. 17 people, 61%. What if it's 5? 5 light ones. Quiet ones without heavy backpacks. Probability. He couldn't ask, but he could calculate it. 5 people instead of 17. The vibration would be 3.5 times weaker. The heat signature would be 3.5 times fainter. A rough estimate. The probability of them waking up drops to 20%, maybe less. So split the group. 12 across the pass into waves. They'll make it 5 through the gorge. The light ones, the quiet ones, those who know how to move silently. He assembled the team. Explained. No map, no screen, just words. 2 routes, the pass for the main group, the gorge for the small group. Maeve asked who would go through the gorge. He said himself. Minsu, Yuna, Finn, and one of the new recruits, a guy named Han. 22 years old, quiet. Light on his feet, a former courier. Used to moving quickly and unnoticed. Maeve said no. She said she was going with him. Daniel said she was too heavy. In terms of weight, footsteps, vibration, they need the lightest ones. Maeve looked at him. Looked at Minsu, 45 kilogram. At Yuna, 42. At Finn, 60. At Daniel, 65. At herself, 73. She clenched her jaw. Then she said that if he died in the gorge, she'd go down there and kill him all over again. Tom nodded. He said he was leading the crossing group. Ashley would be second. Maeve third. Sarah with the main group. They needed a doctor with the main group. Daniel agreed. Sarah gave him a kit, bandages, a regenerator, painkillers just in case. Then she looked him in the eyes. She whispered for him to bring them all back. They split up at noon. 12 to the pass, 5 to the gorge. Maeve stood and watched as the 5 headed east. Daniel turned back once. She stood with a spear, standing straight, mittens with seals on them. The wind ruffled her hair. He raised his hand. She raised hers in response. Then she turned and led the group toward the pass. The gorge opened up 2 hours later. A narrow crevice between 2 cliffs, 3 meters wide, 15 meters high. The bottom was flat, dark. The ice on the walls was blue, deep blue, beautiful and cold. -54. Daniel felt the cold seep through his clothes into his skin and bones within first 30 seconds. He gestured quietly, slowly. Foot in foot, Minsu went first. She moved like a shadow. Silently, she set her feet softly. Toe, roll, heel, a sniper's gait. Yuna followed her. Petite, for jackets now. Daniel had given her his spare. Her steps were small, quiet. Finn was third. The red-headed guy moved surprisingly smoothly for his height. His sister had taught him. Han was fourth, the lightness of a courier. Weightless steps. Daniel was last. He was trying. He was trying very hard, but he was neither a sniper nor a courier, nor a trained survivalist. His footsteps were louder, heavier, each step like a blow in the silence of the gorge. 200 meters on, he saw the first worm, an ice worm in the flesh for the first time. On the map, they were red lines. Here, a creature 8 meters long, 1 meters thick. Its body segmented, covered with an icy crust, whitish, translucent. Some dark structures were visible inside. Organs, or perhaps not organs. It lay along the right wall, curled up like a snake in the sun. Only there was no sun, only cold. Minsu stopped, raised her fist. Stop. Everyone froze. Daniel wasn't breathing. The worm wasn't moving. Hibernation deep -54. Even for the worm, that's the limit. Minsu took a step past it, a meter from the creature. 1 step. 2, 3. She passed. Yuna, step, step, step. Arms pressed against her body. Eyes on the worm. She passed. Thin, long legs, 2 steps instead of 3. He passed. Han, light as a feather. He passed. Daniel, 1 step, his foot landed on an icy ledge. It cracked loudly. The sound echoed off the walls of the gorge. Everyone froze. The worm twitched. One segment shifted slowly, like a person tossing and turning in their sleep. Then it froze. Daniel stood motionless. 1 second, 5, 10, 30, a minute. The worm hadn't woken up. Daniel took the next step carefully, as if walking on eggshells. He passed by. The second worm lay 400 meters away. The second worm stretched 10 meters long. coiled around an ice pillar and leaving barely 1 meter of passage. 1 meter. Minsu went through sideways, pressed against the wall. Went through. Finn, Han. Daniel. He went through last sideways. His backpack scraped against the wall quietly, but it scraped. He saw the worm's body half a meter from his face. Translucent ice. Movement beneath it. Slow. Rhythmic. A heartbeat. The creature was alive, asleep. But alive. 1 meter. He made it through, and emerged on the other side of the worm. He exhaled. The steam from his mouth hung. They cleared only 500 meters in 40 minutes. Yet every silent step past the sleeping worms felt endless. Every step felt like an eternity. At the exit, Yuna sat down in the snow. Her hands were shaking. Not from the cold. She looked at Daniel. She said quietly, "Don't do that again." Ijushi, he nodded, agreed. "Don't do that again." Minsu stood there looking back into the gorge. Her face was calm. Her hands weren't shaking. She'd grown accustomed to fear. Or perhaps she'd learned not to show it. The rendezvous with the main group was scheduled on the other side of the ridge. Daniel led the 5 of them down the slope. The screen showed the route. The main group had crossed the pass. All 12 of them, to groups of 6, both made it. Maeve led the first group. Tom led the second. 40 minutes. Right on time, they met in a hollow beyond the ridge. Maeve stood there and counted the heads. 5. That's all. She looked at Daniel. He looked at her. She walked over silently. She placed her hand on his shoulder, heavily, squeezed, then let go. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. 17 people beyond the ridge alive. They set up camp in the hollow, warm, sheltered from the wind. A fire made of briquettes. Maeve handed out hot water with a civilization powder. The kind that tastes like cocoa. Not cocoa, but hot and slightly sweet. Everyone drank. 17 mugs. 17 pairs of frozen hands. 17 people who could have died today, but didn't. Daniel sat by the fire. A screen before his eyes, a white marker. 26 kilometers. It's getting closer, faster than before. Yesterday, 32. The day before yesterday, 35. 6 kilometers in today's. The 9 in today's. It's picking up speed. He didn't know what it was, but it was heading toward them, or toward outpost 12, or just in the same direction. The white marker kept accelerating toward them, and Maeve quietly sat beside Daniel while he studied its impossible movement. The system provided additional data. A man aged 22 at the time of death. Second category system core. Guild undetermined. Insignia damaged. Date of death approximately 4 months ago. Cause of death, hypothermia. Not a monster. Not a human. The cold. He simply froze to death. The body is intact. Equipment at the scene. Position. Lying on his side. Arms in front of him, as if he were trying to start a fire or writing something in the snow. 22 years old, Korean player for months, second level core, Southern Hammer, Park Junho. It must be him. 90% maybe more. Daniel closed the screen, opened it again, looked at the coordinates, 20 kilometers. Deviation from the route for a today detour for 17 people. That's 2 extra days. 2 extra nights in the cold, 2 days worth of food. Supplies are calculated to the last bit. 2 extra days and someone would go hungry during the final day before reaching base camp. He could have kept it from Minsu, lead the group to base camp, then return with her. Just the 2 of them with proper gear, safer, more logical, the right thing to do. He looked at Minsu. She was sitting in a corner of the camp cleaning her knife just like every morning. Her movements were mechanical. Her eyes were empty. She was looking deep inside herself to where her brother lay. The one she couldn't find. For months, every day, every morning, he made his decision, not as a group, a small team, him, Minsu, Maeve. The 4 of them would head to the waypoint. The remaining 13 would continue to base under Tom and Ashley's command. The route was mapped out. The waypoints were marked. Ashley knew how to lead the group. Tom knew how to keep the formation in order. Yuna would give them a radio for communication. They'll meet at outpost 12 and for days. He walked over to Minsu, sat down next to her. She didn't look up. He said he'd found something on his weather maps. An anomaly 20 kilometers away. Maybe, just maybe, not for sure, but it's worth checking out. She looked up, her eyes dark, wet. She understood right away. She didn't ask what kind of anomaly. She didn't ask how he knew. She just asked when they were leaving. He said, tomorrow morning. She nodded. She lowered her head. Her hands stopped moving across the knife. She just sat there. Daniel stood up and walked over to Maeve. Maeve listened in silence. Then she said she was coming. No questions asked. Tom listened to the plan. He nodded. He said he'd lead the group. Ashley checked the route Daniel had drawn on a piece of paper. Every turn, every window, She asked 3 questions, technical ones, precise ones. She got the answers. She nodded. She said they'd manage. Una gave them a spare battery for the walkie-talkie. She told them to get in touch when they found whatever they found. Sarah handed them a first aid kit, a complete one. She looked at Daniel. She said she'd be waiting at base for all 4 of them. Finn stood next to his sister, quiet, nervous, but his hands weren't shaking. He'd grown up over the past few days. He'd stopped being afraid. Or maybe he'd learned to be afraid the right way. Day 17, morning. The 4 of them headed northwest. 13 continued southwest. Daniel turned around. 13 figures on the white snow. Small, distant, receding. He brought them this far. Now they're going on their own. A strange feeling like letting go of a kite. You held the string, pulled it, guided it, and now the string is cut, and it flies on its own. Or falls. You don't know. All you can do is watch. Maeve walked beside him, a spear slung over her shoulder. Mittens with seals on them. She was silent. Minsu was ahead. Quiet footsteps, eyes on the horizon. They'd been walking all day. 20 kilometers. Daniel had counted everyone. His thigh had healed. The regenerator had done its job. His little finger was pink, alive. His body was functioning. For the first time in 17 days, he was walking without pain, and it felt strange. He'd grown accustomed to the pain. Without it, something was missing. During a rest stop, Maeve asked what he expected to find. He said, "A body, most likely." Maeve looked at Minsu. Minsu was walking ahead. She didn't hear him, or she was pretending not to. Maeve said quietly that if it was her brother, well then, Daniel said that in that case, Minsu would be able to say goodbye. Maeve was silent for a moment. Then she said that sometimes saying goodbye is the most important thing you can do for someone. He nodded. She knew what she was talking about. Her brother Liam was at a boarding school in Boston. Every morning, he looked for her in the hallway. He couldn't find her. She couldn't say goodbye to him because he wouldn't understand the word goodbye. For him, there's only now and not now. By evening, they were 3 kilometers from their destination. They set up camp, a small one. Thermal blanket, fuel briquettes, 3 people, quiet. Minsu wasn't sleeping. Daniel saw her lying there with her eyes open, staring into the darkness. 3 kilometers. Maybe her brother. Maybe not. Maybe just a stranger who froze to death in the snow. Maybe just a blank spot on the map. She didn't know. He knew. 90% sure. But 10% is 10%. And telling her now would mean either giving her hope that might not come true, or preparing her for grief that might never come. Daniel chose silence again, then opened the day 18 briefing at 6 and found the frozen body still 3 kilometers away. Flocks far away, clear approach. White marker 18 kilometers. She picked up the pace even more. 2 days ago, 26. Yesterday 22. Today 18 for kilometers a day. Faster than his team. She's catching up. Daniel looked at the white dot. Whoever you are, you'll be hearing for days. He stood up, woke the team. Said it was 3 kilometers, an hour's walk. A human-shaped mound appeared during the 43rd minute, covered in fresh snow and standing only 1 meter high. Minsu walked ahead faster than usual. Daniel didn't stop her. A small mound appeared in the 43rd minute. Not very high, 1 meter, covered in fresh snow, but the shape human, a body under the snow. Minsu stopped 10 meters away. She stood there staring, her hands at her sides, a knife on her belt, motionless. Daniel walked up to her and stood beside her. Maeve stood on the other side. Minsu took a step, then a second. She approached the mound, dropped to her knees, began to dig with her hands slowly, snow beneath her fingers, layer by layer. Daniel and Maeve stood and watched. They didn't help. It wasn't their place. Minsu dug for 5 minutes. Then she stopped. The fabric of a jacket, gray. A southern hammer patch, torn, but legible. She continued carefully like an archaeologist. A face. A man's, young, eyes closed, peaceful. No pain, no fear. Frozen, motionless, intact. Minsu knelt and looked at her brother's face. Daniel couldn't see her eyes, only her back. Small, thin, wearing the jackets. Her back shuddered. Once, twice, 3 times, a sound. Quiet. Not crying, not screaming, something in between. The sound a person makes when what they feared most has finally happened. And it turns out they can breathe. It hurts, but they can. Maeve stood nearby. Her eyes were red. Her jaw was clenched. Her hands in pink mittens were clenched into fist. She wasn't crying, but she was close to it. Minsu was speaking in Korean, quietly in a whisper as always. Daniel didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. She was telling her brother something. Maybe about how she'd been looking for him. Maybe about how she'd found him. Maybe about how everything was fine, that she was okay. That she'd found people, good people, strange people with a meteorologist who always knows where to go, and a girl wearing mittens, with kittens on them. 10 minutes later, she stood up. She turned around. Her face was wet. Her eyes were red but calm. She said one word. Thank you. Daniel nodded. Maeve stepped toward her, hugged her roughly, tightly. The way people hug who don't know how to hug gently. Minsu froze, then she went limp, pressed herself against her. A little girl in the arms of a big woman in the snow. In the cold, next to her brother's body. They buried him as best they could. Stones on top, so the animals wouldn't get to him. Minsu placed her homemade knife on the stones. The first one. The one made from a piece of metal and a stick. The one she'd survived on for 3 weeks. She left it for her brother. She took his core. Second class, non-functional, extinguished, but it was his. She hung it around her neck next to her own. 2 cores to brothers, one alive, one dead. They set out back at noon toward Outpost 12. A 4-day journey. Minsu walked between Daniel and Maeve. Not in front, not behind, in between. She didn't speak. But she walked more steadily than before, as if something inside had fallen into place, a cog in the mechanism, a note in a chord. Something that had hurt and gotten in the way, and now no longer got in the way. It hadn't stopped hurting, but it had stopped getting in the way of walking. That evening, Maeve sat by the campfire and mended the strap on Minsu's backpack. Minsu sat next to her, and for the first time in days wasn't sharpening her knife. She just sat there staring at the fire, quiet as always, but a different kind of quiet. Not the kind of silence that hides a scream, a different one. One that's simply silence. Daniel checked the map. A white marker. 14 kilometers even faster. He didn't know what it was. But in 3 days he'd find out. Day 19. 6 in the morning. Briefing. Route to Outpost 12. 30 kilometers. 3 days at a normal pace. The packs are scattered. 2 hound patrols far to the east. The worms are in hibernation. Clear corridor. Stable weather. -32. Light wind. Perfect conditions. Daniel didn't trust perfect conditions. White marker 11 kilometers. She wasn't just walking. She was heading toward them. Trajectory a straight line from her current position to their current position. Not toward base, toward them. He activated the social layer. Tried to read the indicator. White undefined. The system wasn't providing data. No green, no yellow. No red, as if the marker existed outside of categories. The first what if query. What would happen if the white marker reached our position? The answer. Insufficient data for a forecast. For the first time, the system gave no answer. Daniel stared at the line. Insufficient data. For 18 days, the system had answered every question with percentages, with probabilities accurate to the minute, and now insufficient. He closed the screen, opened it, looked again. A white dot 11 kilometers soon, about 4 kilometers a day. In 3 days, she'll be here or they'll be at the base if they walk fast. He assembled the team. Maeve and Minsu 30 kilometers in 3 days, 10 a day. Fast for 3 people, but possible. Maeve asked why they had to rush. He said it was the weather, that the front would be here in 3 days. That they needed to be at base camp before the front. A half-truth. The front was indeed coming in 5 days. Not 3, but close. They walked fast. 10 kilometers on the first day. Maeve set the pace. Minsu kept up. After her brother's funeral, something in her had snapped into place. Her stride was more confident. On day 20, the white marker closed to 7 kilometers, forcing Daniel to recalculate every remaining hour. The second day, the 20th overall, briefing, white marker, 7 kilometers. She picked up the pace even more. Daniel recalculated. Tomorrow she'll be here tomorrow, not in 3 days. Tomorrow. And there are still 20 kilometers to the base. 1 day if she runs, 2 if she walks. He used his second request. Can I get ahead of the white marker and reach the base sooner? The answer, no. At your current speed. The white marker will cross your route tomorrow around 2 in the afternoon. 2 in the afternoon. Tomorrow on the route. He had to tell the team. But what could he say? Something undefined is approaching us. The system doesn't know what it is. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's nothing to worry about. Maybe it's the end. Maeve noticed his expression. She walked over. She asked quietly what was wrong. He said there might be an encounter along the route with someone. He doesn't know who. He didn't know why. Maeve nodded silently. She adjusted the spear on her shoulder. Her expression didn't change. Minsu heard him. She moved closer, her hand on her knife. Daniel said it wasn't necessarily an enemy. Maybe just a traveler. Maybe a survivor. Maybe anyone. Maeve said that if it wasn't an enemy, that was good. If it's an enemy, they have a spear and 2 knives. By day 21, The marker was only 3 kilometers away and moving faster than every previous forecast. He almost smiled. Day 3, 21st overall, 6 in the morning, briefing. White marker. 3 kilometers, the speed increased. She wouldn't be here at 2. At noon, even faster than yesterday. The crossing route. A flat stretch between 2 ridges of hills. Open terrain. Nowhere to hide. Daniel used his third and final query. What kind of target is marked with a white marker? The response. The system processed the query for 3 seconds, then 5, then 10. Daniel waited. The response came in an unusual format. Not a forecast, not a probability. The system finally identified the target as an active operator called M, proving the mysterious predecessor was still alive. M was alive, and the operator whose warnings ended 11 months earlier was now approaching Daniel directly. Don't go there. They're listening through the ether. He's alive and he's coming for them. White tag undefined because the system can't categorize another operator. Green, yellow, red. That's for ordinary people, an operator beyond categories. Daniel sat in the snow and stared at the screen. Daniel could only wonder who M was, what the operator knew, and what truly happened to Northern Dawn's 900 people. 100 people on the Northern Dawn. He didn't tell the team, not everything. He said a person was coming toward them. One person, not from the pack, not from the guild, someone special. The danger was unknown. Maeve gripped her spear. At noon, a lone figure appeared against the white horizon, walking with the calm certainty of someone who knew the route. They waited. Noon, 3 minutes passed. A figure appeared on the horizon, one small against the white background, moving steadily, confidently, not fast, not slow. Like a person who knows exactly where they're going. Daniel squinted, far away, but getting closer. Minsu tightened her grip while Maeve leveled her spear, watching the woman close from 500 meters to 200. A woman, tall, slender, a long black coat down to her knees, not a thermal suit, not a field uniform. A coat like you'd wear in the city, black hair pulled back, Asian features, age 35, maybe 40, eyes calm, appraising, the gaze of someone who sees things others don't. She stopped 20 meters away. She raised her hands, palms open, no weapons, no threat. She looked at Daniel straight on through Maeve, through Minsu at him, and she said 3 words. Hello, Operator Kim. Daniel was silent. The screen before his eyes, a white marker. 0 meters right in front of him. The white marker stopped directly before Daniel, revealing Operator M as a living woman in a city coat. Maeve didn't lower her spear. Quietly, he asked who she was. The woman looked at Maeve, then back at Daniel. She said her name was Han Jisoo, that she was a former police detective, that for the past 11 months, she had been a system operator, and that she had come because his briefing had called her, just as her briefing had once called him. Daniel looked at her. Han Jisoo, not M. Or maybe M is the initial of something else. He asked what M stood for. She smiled. Her first smile. Subtle, tired. She said that M stood for dead. A status she'd assigned herself when she realized she wouldn't make it out of the tundra alive. But then she changed her mind. She walked past Maeve. Maeve didn't stop her. The spear wavered, but remained in place. Something about this woman said there was no need to stop her. Han Jisoo stood in front of Daniel. She looked him in the eyes up close. She said she'd seen him on her map 3 weeks ago. A tiny blue dot. She'd never seen blue dots before, only green, yellow, red, and white ones. Blue was new. The system told her one word. Operator. And she went. Because 11 months alone is too long. Even for a dead person. Daniel was silent. Then he asked about the Northern Dawn, about the 900 people, about the crater. Her expression changed for the first time. A shadow passed over her eyes. She said she'd tell him. She'd tell him everything. But not here. Not in an open field. Not where they could be overheard. Because what happened to the Northern Lights wasn't just a tragedy. It was a trap. And the trap was still open. Maeve lowered her spear slowly. Minsu sheathed her knife slowly. Daniel nodded. He said that Outpost 12 was 20 kilometers away. That they'd reach it tomorrow. That there were walls there, warmth, safety. Han Jisoo nodded. Then she looked at Daniel's backpack. She asked if he had any coffee. He said he had some civilization powder vaguely similar to cocoa. She said that would do. The 4 of them set up camp 20 kilometers to the base. 1 day for people. 2 system operators, a spearwoman in mittens with seals on them, a sniper with 2 projectiles around his neck. Daniel poured from mugs of hot powder. He handed them out. Han Jisoo took hers. She took a sip. She grimaced. She said it wasn't coffee. He agreed. She took another sip. Then she said that at least it was hot, and that in the tundra being hot is more important than tasting good. Maeve said that was the first smart thing she'd heard from a stranger in a coat. Han Jisoo looked at Maeve, then at the mittens with the kittens on them. Then she said the mittens were wonderful. Maeve said, "Thank you." Minsu silently drank her powder. She looked at Han Jisoo, assessing her like a sniper quietly. Daniel sat and thought. To operators, him and her. To briefings, 2 sets of data. If their maps could be combined, a 60 kilometers radius or more. He didn't know how the intersection of the 2 systems worked, but he knew that tomorrow morning he would receive a new briefing, and so would she. And then they would compare the maps, and he would finally learn the truth about Northern Dawn, about the trap that was still open, about what was happening deep in the tundra, and about why the system chooses the dying. He turned off the screen, finished the powder, lay down on the thermal blanket, Maeve on his right, Minsu on his left. Han Jisoo was across from him, wrapped in a coat, holding a mug. She hadn't slept. She was looking at him calmly, appraisingly, like someone deciding whether to trust him. He knew that look. He looked at Maeve that way himself on the first day. Then he trusted her. Then he didn't regret it. Tomorrow, the base. Tomorrow, the team. Tomorrow, the truth. But for now, the 4 of them in the snow, hot powder, and silence. Day 22. Outpost 12. Daniel saw it from top of the last hill. Walls of concrete and steel, watchtowers, searchlights, smoke from the chimneys. Sounds, human sounds, voices, the clang of metal, the rumble of generators. After 22 days of silence and wind, it was deafening. Maeve stood beside him. She looked on, then she said quietly that she could see the gate. Minsu stood in silence, her hand on her knife. A habit. Han Jisoo adjusted her coat as if she were going to a business meeting rather than emerging from an icy desert. They made their way down to the gate in 2 hours. Guards at the entrance. 2 of them heavy weaponry, northern shield. One of them looked at the 4 of them. To Korean women. An Irish woman with a spear wearing mittens with seals on them. A woman in a city coat and a skinny guy with glasses in front. The guard asked for the guild. Daniel said, "Pine Harpoon." The guard checked the database. Found it. Daniel Kim's status missing. 21 days written off. He looked at Daniel, then at the rest of them, then let them through. Beyond the gates lay the world. Another world. Tents, modular homes, market stalls, people, hundreds of people, players in thermal suits. Merchants in insulated jackets, mechanics, cooks, information brokers with tablets. The smell of food, real food. Not the rations of ancient civilization, meat, bread, coffee. Daniel stopped. He took a deep breath. Coffee, real coffee. Maeve put her hand on his shoulder. She said, "Business first, then coffee." Tom Nakamura was waiting for them at the 3rd module. 13 people, all alive, all at the base. They made it in 3 days, no casualties. Following the route Daniel had sketched out on paper. Tom hugged Daniel tightly like a brother. Then he let go. He looked at Han Jisoo, a question in his eyes. Daniel said later, first, they needed to settle in. A module for 20 people, cramped but warm. Plus 5 degrees, a stove. Bunk beds, blankets, real blankets. Yuna was sitting in the corner with a walkie-talkie. She saw Daniel. She stood up. She walked over. She looked at him. Then she said quietly, "Welcome back, Ijushi." Sarah examined all 4 of them. Maeve. The stitches had healed completely. Minsu, her shoulder was fine. Daniel. His little finger was his hip had healed. Han Jisoo, dehydration, exhaustion, 11 months alone in the tundra. Her body was at its limit. Sarah sat her down. Sarah connected an intravenous line from the base medical station, then gave Han Jisoo hot food and careful supervision. Like someone who hadn't eaten normal food in a long time. That evening, Daniel gathered a small circle. Maeve, Yuna, Sarah, Minsu, Ashley, Han Jisoo, 6 women, and him. Tom and Finn stood outside keeping watch to make sure no one eavesdropped. Han Jisoo spoke for 2 hours, quietly, steadily. Her voice was devoid of emotion. The voice of an investigator stating the facts. She had received the system 14 months ago. She had been dying from a stab wound in Sector 6. A former police officer. She'd ended up in the tundra on contract after being fired from the police force. She worked as a middleman between the guilds, buying and selling information. The system had given her the same thing it gave Daniel, a map, a weather report, stashes, a social profile. What ifs? She used the briefings for trading. She sold routes. She sold stash coordinates. She sold information about packs, for money, for ether, for influence. Not out of greed, out of habit. A police officer, then a middleman. Information is currency. She traded in currency. 3 months later, Black Whale, Helen Park herself, she offered a partnership. Han Jisoo agreed. For 2 months, she supplied Black Whale with data, pack routes, coordinates of resources, competitors' weak points. Black Whale paid generously. Then Helen Park asked for more. A route through the Ridge of Silence into the sector beyond the ridge, where the Northern Dawn expedition was headed. 900 people, the best of the best. They were searching for relics of an ancient civilization, technologies that could shift the balance of power on the planet. Han Jisoo provided the route through her briefing. Precise, safe, or so she thought. She didn't know that Helen Park had passed the route not to Northern Dawn, but to Northern Dawn's competitors, a corporation that wanted to reach the relics first. The corporation intercepted the route. It altered key waypoints. It set a trap for the Northern Dawn. 900 people entered the sector via a route that looked safe but led straight to the central fault, a place where the ether concentrates to critical density, a place where the ancient civilization system defends itself. 900 people froze to death on the spot. Instantly, a temperature shock. -100 in a fraction of a second. The system's defense mechanism, automatic. Without reason, without mercy, just a safety protocol. Don't approach the center. Han Jisoo found out a week later, when the satellite showed a flash and then silence. When she realized her route had been used as a weapon, she went to see Helen Park. She demanded an explanation. Helen Park smiled. She said that information is a tool. That a tool bears no responsibility for those who use it. That Han Jisoo was to blame herself because she sold the data without checking who was buying it, or why. Han Jisoo left that very same day, deep into the tundra alone. She assigned herself status M dead, because she believed she deserved to die. 11 months alone in the deepest sectors. She collected data. She mapped the tundra. She tried to understand how the ancient civilization's defense mechanism worked, how to bypass it or disable it so that the bodies of the Northern Dawn could be reached, so that they could be retrieved, buried. She fell silent. The mug had grown cold in her hands. 6 pairs of eyes were watching her. Maeve was the first. She asked quietly, "So, she's to blame?" Han Jisoo looked up. She said yes. She had provided the route. She hadn't checked who would use it. She was to blame. Silence. A long one. Yuna was the first to break it. She said quietly that Helen Park was to blame, that she'd used the route as a weapon. Han Jisoo replied that a gun doesn't fire on its own, but whoever loads it also bears responsibility. Daniel was silent. He was thinking. Then he said that blame was a matter for later. Right now, there was another issue. The trap? Han Jisoo said that the central fault was still open, that the defense mechanism was active, that Helen Park knew about it, and that Black Whale was preparing a new expedition, not for relics, for the system itself. The first week at Outpost 12, Daniel hadn't rested. No time. He got up at 6 in the morning on his first day at the base, briefing map. Outpost 12 was teeming with markers, 347 people within the radius, green, yellow, red, like an anthill. He stepped out of the module. Maeve followed him. She didn't ask where, she just went. They reached the market stalls, tents, tables, people. Information brokers were selling sector maps for ether. Outdated, inaccurate. Daniel looked at the prices. A map of a single sector, 100 G of ether. That's a rookie's monthly salary for a map that was a week out of date. He looked at his briefing. 30 square kilometers, updated every morning, free, accurate. He stood among the market stalls and thought. Then he turned to Maeve. He said he needed a stall and a coffee pot. Maeve looked at him. Then she understood. She smiled. She said he was serious. He said, "Absolutely." 3 days later, a stall appeared at the edge of the market rows. Small, to buy 3 meters, a hand-drawn sign, morning coffee, under the sign in small print. Weather reports for survival, personalized service, fixed price. Daniel got up at 5. He received the briefing at 6 in the morning. He spent an hour processing the data. He didn't hand out raw maps. He translated a custom translation for each client to a newbie. Don't go north of the 3rd rock. Be back by 4. To a veteran, wind shift at 1140. Adjust by 3 degrees for shooting in the afternoon. The pack will pass through the canyon at 410. Window from 12 to 3. To a scout. Cache to kilometers southeast. Untouched. Clear approach until noon. Everyone to each his own. Exactly as much as each needs. No more. Day 1. To clients, newbies. They came because Tom told some friends. They paid 10 grams of ether each. Small change. But both came back alive. Day 3. 7 clients. Word got around. The guy in the tank gives updates. Accurate ones. Everyone who went based on his intel came back. A week. 20 clients a day. Line starts at 5 in the morning. Yuna set up a registration system. Numbers, time slots, no more than 5 minutes per client. She sat at the entrance with a tablet and managed the flow. Sarah was on duty nearby. Anyone who came in with wounds received a report and a bandage free of charge. Maeve stood behind the tent. Security, a spear against the wall, mittens with kittens. No one tried to cause trouble. Yet Ashley was training the newbies in front of the tent while they waited in line. How to position their feet, how to breathe, how to conserve heat. Free lessons for those who came for a briefing. Minsu sat on the roof of the module across the way watching, a sniper without a rifle. But her eyes were sharp. She saw everyone who approached, everyone who stood there too long, everyone who looked not at the tent, but at the people around the tent. Han Jisoo left on the very first day. That couldn't hold her back. She said she had things to do. Han Jisoo needed exact black whale routes, timelines, names, and the true schedule behind Helen Park's expedition. She returned for days later. Dark circles under her eyes, but with information. Helen Park at Outpost 7 base, 200 kilometers south. She's assembling a squad, 200 fighters. Departure in 6 weeks. Route through the Ridge of Silence to the Central Fault. Objective, capture the system node. Han Jisoo added something else. Black Whale is looking for Daniel. Actively. Helen Park knows that a man with impossibly accurate predictions has appeared at Outpost 12. She doesn't know exactly who it is yet, but she'll find out. It's just a matter of days. Daniel listened. He nodded. He counted. 6 weeks. 42 days. A lot can be done in 42 days or nothing at all. He looked at the team. 7 people in the module. Maeve, Yuna, Sarah, Minsu, Ashley, Han Jisoo. Tom was standing by the door. Finn was nearby. 17 people at the base, plus the morning coffee customers. 20 a day. 100 a week. People who had survived, according to his data, people who cared about him. He said he wouldn't run. That black whale would arrive at the rift in 6 weeks, for weeks to prepare. Daniel assigned the tasks, Yuna, communications and reconnaissance. She intercepted black whale every day. Decryption had reached 40%. Helen Park set the departure date 14 days from now. The squad's composition 180 fighters, not 200. 20 had refused. Rumors about the Central Fault and the destruction of the Northern Dawn had leaked out. That's why he got scared. Yuna smiled as she reported. Her first real smile in all this time. She said the rumors didn't leak on their own. That she'd helped through anonymous channels on frequencies that all the guilds monitor. Daniel looked at her. A hacker information warfare. She wasn't just listening. She was taking action. Ashley training. 3 weeks of daily drills. Not all 17 of them. A 9-person squad. Daniel, Maeve, Yuna, Sarah, Minsu, Ashley, Han, Jisoo, Tom, Finn. The other 8 remain at base. They're running morning coffee. They'll keep working. If the squad doesn't return, the briefing system will stay in place. People will keep getting updates, not from the briefing, but from the people Daniel trained to read the tundra. Not as accurately, but better than nothing. Ashley pushed them like recruits up at 5. Running around the base perimeter, drilling drill movements, quiet march. Ashley drilled the silent march she had promised Daniel, teaching everyone to step toe first. Roll forward, and settle the heel. Daniel still moved clumsily, but after 1 week, his footsteps became quieter. Though nowhere near Minsu's level. A firefighter, she was used to physical training. After 2 weeks, she moved through the snow like a ghost. A big one, red-haired, wearing mittens with seals on them. But a ghost? Minsu, a sniper. She needed a rifle. Daniel located an ancient weapons cache 30 kilometers from the base and sent Tom with Minsu to retrieve it. He sent Tom and Minsu. Today as they returned, Minsu was carrying a long bundle of thermal fabric. Once she returned to the module, a rifle, black metal from the ancient civilization era. Not gunpowder, not energy, something else. The ancient kinetic rifle accelerated each projectile to 3 kilometers per second without recoil, reaching targets 2 kilometers away. She rested it on her shoulder. She pressed her cheek against the stock. She closed her left eye. Her right eye looked through the sight. She didn't smile, but her fingers stopped trembling. For the first time, Sarah medical training. She packed a field hospital into 2 backpacks. A regenerator from the ancient civilization complex, antibiotics, dressing supplies, painkillers. She calculated enough for 9 people for 10 days with a reserve for injuries. There would be injuries. She knew a doctor always knows. Han Jisoo the route. She had spent 11 months in the tundra, mapping the territory beyond the Ridge of Silence. She knew passages that didn't appear on any map. She knew the habits of the creatures in the deep sectors. She knew where to go and where not to go. Her route to the Central Fault took 8 days through the tunnels of ancient civilization. Underground, warm, safe from the packs, not safe from other things, traps, defense mechanisms. the automated systems that had destroyed the Northern Dawn. Han Ji-soo knew which ones could be bypassed, which ones to disable, which ones to simply endure. 11 months of knowledge, her penance, her way of making amends for what she had done. Daniel and Han Ji-soo coordinated their briefings. Every morning they sat side by side, 2 screens, 2 sets of data. His map 30 kilometers, her map 30 kilometers, but with a different center together, 55 kilometers of coverage. The overlap of the zones provided double the accuracy in the shared area. The pack routes were confirmed by sources. Hiding spots were mapped faster. The social layer came together like a mosaic. Yuna watched them, how they sat side by side, to people with invisible screens muttering numbers. Coordinates time. She said it looked like to crazy people talking to thin air. Maeve said all meteorologists are crazy. It's a professional thing. A week before the mission, Daniel was sitting in the morning coffee tent, his last day on the job. Tomorrow, he'd hand the tent over to his assistants, 2 of his 17. Trained, not perfect, but good enough. The last customer of the day, a young guy, 20 years old, a rookie. His first shift is tomorrow. Eyes wide, hands shaking. Daniel looked at him, looked at the briefing. The guy's route for tomorrow ran through a clear zone. No flocks, no anomalies, a safe day. He told the guy that tomorrow the wind would be from the south. Come flocks are in the north. Head strictly west. No further than 5 kilometers, be back by 3. Take 2 liters of water, a chocolate bar. Don't forget your scarf. The guy looked at him. Then he asked how he knew he'd need a scarf. Daniel said the humidity would be high tomorrow. His throat would get dry. A scarf would help. The guy nodded. He took the piece of paper with the report. Then he paused. He asked if it was true that Daniel was leaving, that morning coffee was closing. Daniel said it wasn't closing, that other people would be providing reports. Not as accurate, but useful. The guy was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you," and left. Daniel sat in the tent. He looked at his hands. In a week, those hands would be in the central fault, near the spot where 900 people had frozen to death while standing. Near the black metal pillar, near the heart of the tundra. Maeve walked in silently. She sat down next to him. She took out a thermos. She poured him a mug. Not that powdered stuff from civilization, real cocoa. She bought it at the base. Spent half the ether she'd earned. He looked at the mug, then at her. She said she promised. He didn't remember her promising cocoa. She said she'd promised herself. He took the mug. Hot, sweet, real chocolate. The taste of childhood, the taste of home. The taste of the kitchen in Seattle, where Mom used to make cocoa on Saturdays. He drank, and said nothing. Maeve sat beside him, and said nothing. There was no need to speak. Tomorrow they were heading to the most dangerous place on the planet. But for now, there was hot chocolate, and silence, and a warm shoulder beside him. Day 1 of the expedition, the Ridge of Silence. Daniel was seeing it for the first time, a wall of ice and rock 600 meters high, stretching from horizon to horizon. Beyond it lay the sector from which the Northern Dawn had never returned. Han Ji-soo led the way confidently, without hesitation. She knew every rock. The entrance to the ancient civilization tunnel narrow, between 2 icy ledges at the foot of the ridge. Impossible to find without a map, impossible to find without the briefing. But Han Ji-soo found it 11 months ago. Using a method older than any system. Feet, patience, stubbornness. The tunnel, black metal. Blue light, a temperature of +3. After -40 outside, it was like stepping into a warm bath. Wide for meters, tall, 5. Built for something larger than a human. The ancient civilization wasn't small. They walked through the tunnel for 2 days. Han Ji-soo in front, Daniel behind her. Both were reading the briefings. 2 screens, 2 maps. The tunnel branched off 6 times. Each time, Han Ji-soo chose a turn without hesitation. At the 3rd fork, Daniel checked his screen. Left tunnel, a trap, a thermal charge. Temperature -180 upon detonation. Right tunnel, clear. Han Ji-soo went right. He asked how she knew. She said it was the air. The left tunnel smelled of ozone. That was the smell of an ethereal charge, for 11 months. She had trained her nose to make up for what the screen didn't show. He had learned to read the map. She had learned to read the air. Day 3. The tunnel led to an underground hall. A huge one. 100 meters long, 50 wide, 20 high. Blue light, bright machines stood here. Ancient civilization, mechanisms of unknown purpose. Steel structures covered in frost, dead, shut down long ago. Maeve walked among them. She touched them. The scale. These weren't people. Not in the human sense. Something else. Something massive. Day 4. First contact with the defenses. The corridor narrowed, to meters. The walls began to glow brighter. Ether concentration. The briefing sensor showed a spike to 100% above normal. 300, 500. Han Jisoo stopped. She raised her hand. Stop. She said the defense perimeter was ahead. An automatic thermal blast guarded the corridor, using the same lethal defense that had destroyed Northern Dawn. What would happen if we crossed the defense perimeter? The answer, a thermal blast. Minus 100. Instant death. The blast radius is 30 meters. He looked at Han Jisoo. She nodded. She said she knew how to get through. 11 months she'd found a way. Not to bypass it, not to disable it, to get through. The system recognizes operators. The pillar in the crater, the screen. Last operator M access confirmed. She's an operator. The system knows her. Han Jisoo submitted a briefing request for safe passage, asking the defense system to recognize all 9 members. The screen flashed. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Response. Request processed. Passage granted. Time window. For minutes. Han Jisoo turned to the group. She called out as they ran. For minutes. They ran. 9 people through the tunnel. 30 meters of the affected zone. For minutes. Maeve was first. Minsu was last. Daniel counted the seconds. 100. 200. 240. For minutes. Everyone had made it through. Behind them, the corridor flashed blue. The temperature dropped to minus 100 in a fraction of a second. The shield was restored. Finn stood there looking back. White? Then he quietly said he didn't want to go back that way. Maeve said he had the right priorities. Day 5. Day 6. The tunnels widened. The temperature rose plus 10. Plus 15. Warm, real warmth. The black metal walls were covered with something like moss, blue, glowing. Ethereal life. Not plants, not fungi. Something else entirely. Sarah was piecing together a picture. A doctor and a scientist. She couldn't help herself. Day 7. They emerged from the tunnel to the surface and saw the crater, a perfect circle. 1 kilometer in diameter. The walls were icy, sheer, 100 meters deep. At the bottom, bodies 900 bodies frozen in a standing position, with their eyes open facing the center like soldiers on parade. Like a prayer. Like a final breath frozen forever. Maeve stood at the edge. She looked down. Her face was pale. Her hands and mittens were clenched into fist. Sarah stood beside her, a hand on her chest. Her lips were moving. A prayer or a count or just the words. You have to say when you see 900 dead. Yuna turned away. Minsu watched straight ahead without looking away, a sniper. She was used to seeing this. H and Jisoo stood motionless. Her face was stony. For 11 months. She'd been preparing to see this again. And yet, Tom stood at attention, like a soldier before a memorial. Finn was beside him, quiet. Truly quiet for the first time. In the center of the crater, a pillar. Black metal, 1 meter. A blue screen at the top flashing. Waiting. The descent took an hour down an icy wall. Ashley led the way. Ropes, ballets. Metal carabiners from the ancient civilization era. She brought all 9 of them down without a single injury. At the bottom among the bodies, Daniel tried not to look at their faces. He couldn't help it. Young, old, men, women, all with their eyes open, all staring at the center. At the pillar. They approached it. Han Jisoo was the first. She placed her hand on the black metal. The screen flashed. Lines of text scrolled across it. Operator M access confirmed. Last entry. I'm sorry. I thought I could handle it alone. Not her entry. The previous operators. The one who came before her. The one who brought the Northern Dawn here. Or maybe he didn't. Han Jisoo shook her head. She said she hadn't written that. And not M before her either. Someone even earlier. The system was older than they thought. There had been many operators, dozens. Maybe hundreds over the years, over the decades. She stepped away. Daniel approached. He placed his hand on the metal. The screen flashed. Operator Daniel Kim, do you wish to continue your service? He looked at the continue service. Don't take control. Don't seize power. Continue service. The system didn't offer him a weapon. Didn't offer him power. It offered him a job. The same job he'd always done. Read the map. Make predictions. Help people stay alive. He typed in the air with 1 finger. 3 words. Yes, but not alone. The screen flickered. Processing request. 5 seconds. 10:15. Then request accepted. Multi-operator mode activated. Select operators. And in front of each of them. In front of Maeve, in front of Yuna, in front of Sarah, in front of Minsu, in front of Ashley. In front of Han Jisoo. Blue screens popped up. 6 screens, 6 briefings. Maeve stared at the air in front of her. Then at Daniel, then back at the screen. She said quietly that she saw a map. That she saw lines. Red ones. Yellow ones. That she saw markers. Yuna looked at her screen. Then she started laughing quietly. Genuinely. She said the interface was awful, that she'd redesign it. Sarah was reading the data, the medical layer, the health status of each team member, heart rate, stress level, risk of frostbite. Her eyes welled up. She said she knew whose wound needed to be treated tomorrow, specifically by name. Minsu looked through the crosshairs on her screen. The ballistic layer, wind, distance, adjustments. She nodded. Not a word. But a sniper's nod was worth 10 words. Ashley was reading the terrain map. Terrain, cover, evacuation routes. She said that now she could train people 10 times more effectively. Han Jisoo looked at her updated screen. The radius had increased 70 kilometers. A joint network of 8 operators covering territory that no guild had seen in 7 years. She looked at Daniel. She said quietly that he was the first to ask, not alone. That every operator before him had wanted to control the system on his own. That the system had given them a choice and each had chosen himself. He chose the team and the system took notice. They climbed out of the crater at dawn. If you could call it that. The tundra knows no sun, but the sky had grown slightly lighter, gray instead of black. That was enough. Daniel stood at the edge and looked down. 900 bodies. He couldn't retrieve them, couldn't bury them, but he could ensure their deaths wouldn't be repeated. Briefing 600. New different radius 70 kilometers. 8 operators. Data flowed like a river. Flock routes for the next 3 days, not just 1, 3. The system had expanded the forecast horizon for the multi-operator network. The margin of error was higher, but it could see farther, and he saw it to the south. 48 kilometers. A column, 180 red markers, moving north toward the Ridge of Silence. Black Whale Helen Park. They'd left earlier, not into weeks. Right now, Yuna had intercepted the signal. Helen Park had changed the plan. Someone had reported that a small group had headed for the fault. Someone at the base. Someone among the 347 markers at Outpost 12. The yellow one that turned red. Daniel looked at the map. 180 fighters. Heavy weaponry, ether shielding against 9 people. The math was simple, impossible. He looked at the team. Maeve was reading her briefing. Her face was focused. Her spear was at her feet. She saw the red markers. Every one did. 8 screens, 1 image. 180 dots heading toward them. Ton the first asked, "What do we do?" Daniel closed his eyes. He thought, not as a commander, as a meteorologist. The incoming force moved 3 kilometers per hour, placing 180 fighters only 16 hours from the ridge. They'll be at the tunnel tomorrow morning, but they don't know the way. Han Jisoo found the entrance after weeks of searching. The Black Whale doesn't have her 11 months of experience. They'll have to look for a passage. 1 day, 2, maybe 3, plus the security perimeter. They can't get through without operator access. Minus 100 instant death. Helen Park is smart. She won't go through the defenses. She'll look for another way or she'll force someone to open a passage. Someone an operator. Him or Han Jisoo. So she doesn't need the rift. She needs an operator alive. Daniel opened his eyes. He said they wouldn't fight. 180 against 9 isn't a battle. It's suicide. They'll do something else. They'll close the door. He turned to Han Jisoo. He asked if the defensive perimeter could be expanded. Could it cover more than 30 meters? The entire tunnel. The entire approach to the crater. Han Jisoo looked at him, then at her screen, then at the pillar in the center of the crater. She went back down alone to the pillar. She placed her hand on the metal. 10 minutes, 20, 30. She came back up. Her face was tired, but her eyes were bright. She said yes, a multi-operator request. All 8 operators simultaneously. The system can expand the perimeter to 1 kilometers. The tunnel, the approaches, the ridge at the entrance. A 1 kilometer zone where anyone entering without authorization will be at minus 100. An impenetrable wall. Black Whale could bring even 1,000 fighters. They won't get through. But there's a condition. 8 operators must confirm the request simultaneously and maintain it constantly. As long as the perimeter is active, the operators are tied to the node. They can't stray more than 50 meters from the marker. They're sitting in a crater among the dead and holding the wall. Daniel looked at the team. 8 pairs of eyes. He didn't give an order. He didn't ask. He just looked. Maeve was first. She said that sitting in a crater wasn't the worst thing she'd ever done. Once she'd sat in a burning basement for 6 hours. At least it wasn't smoky here. Yuna was second. She said she needed access to the interface. That she could optimize the load distribution among the operators, write a script in her head, then implement it through the system. She'd already done the calculations. Sarah was third. She said there were 900 bodies in the crater. That she wanted to examine them, that maybe some of them weren't dead. That cryopreservation was possible at minus 100. That she was a doctor, and she checked. Mincet was fourth. She nodded silently. Then she looked at the edge of the crater. She said that if anyone tried to climb down, she'd spot them from 2 kilometers away. An ancient civilization rifle slung over her shoulder. Ashley was 5th. She said she'd organize the defense of the crater's perimeter just in case someone got through the defenses. Han Jisoo confirmed 6th, needing no speech after surviving 11 months alone beyond the ridge. Now she wasn't alone. That was enough. Tom and Finn, not system operators but part of the team. Tom said he'd stand at the tunnel entrance on the side, Finn next to him. 2 people. The last line of defense. Daniel nodded. Then he descended into the crater. He walked up to the post. He placed his hand on the metal. The screen flashed. He entered the command, expand the security perimeter. 1 kilometer radius. Multi-operator confirmation. 7 screens flashed simultaneously. 7 hands gestured into the air. Confirmed, 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 confirmed. The column hummed quietly, deeply. The sound came from beneath the ground, from the crater walls, from the ridge. The blue light grew brighter, then brighter. Still, then blinding. Then it went out. Silence. The screen refreshed. Defense perimeter activated. Radius 1 kilometer. Status remains active as long as operators are present in the node zone. Daniel exhaled. The wall stands. They'd been waiting for 3 days in the crater among the dead. Sarah was going through the bodies one by one. 900. She hadn't slept. She checked each one. On the 3rd day, she approached Daniel. Her eyes were red, her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. She said that 17 out of 900 were in a state of deep cryopreservation, not dead. Technically, cellular activity was minimal, but present. If they applied the ancient civilization regenerator in the correct dosage and slowly raised the temperature, it was possible. Not certain, but possible. Daniel looked at her, then at the 17 bodies she had marked with colored tape. From the first aid kit. 17 out of 900. 2%. He remembered 2%. His own chance of survival on the first night. He had survived. Sarah got to work. Yuna helped. Maeve hauled the regenerator out of the backpacks. Mincy stood at the edge of the crater and looked through the scope. Han Jisoo held the perimeter. Ashley allocated resources. Tom and Finn patrolled the tunnel. On the 4th day, Yuna intercepted a transmission. Helen Park. An open frequency on purpose. She knew she was being listened to. A voice. A woman's calm, cold. She was speaking to Daniel. She said she knew he was in the crater, that her squad was at the ridge, that they'd found the tunnel, and that the defensive perimeter wouldn't let them through. That 7 of her fighters had died trying to break through. Instantly, -100. She said he was cute. That hot chocolate and briefing reports were cute for a rookie. But that information of this level shouldn't belong to a boy with a mug. That the system is a weapon. And weapons should be in the hands of those who know how to use them. Daniel listened. Then he took the radio from Yuna. He pressed the transmit button. He said that the system isn't a weapon, that it's a working tool. Like a weather station, like a satellite map, like the morning weather report, that he doesn't control the system. He works within it just like he used to work in Seattle. 3 monitors, coffee, data, forecast, action. That 900 people died not because of the system, but because of those who decided. That information is property, not a service. He paused. Then he said that if she wanted to get in, she had to ask. Not force her way in. Ask. The system lets in those invited by the operators. And the operators invite those they trust, and he doesn't trust her. Silence on the frequency. 10 seconds. 20. Helen Park's voice. It had changed. Quieter. She said he was naive. That the world doesn't run on trust. That resources belong to those who can hold on to them. Daniel replied that resources belong to those who share them. That morning coffee runs on Outpost 12 every morning without him. That 20 people a day receive the briefings. That yesterday it was 40. That tomorrow it will be 60. That the information he distributes doesn't lose its value just because many people use it. And the information she hides loses its meaning. Silence, a long one. Then Helen Park said he'd come to regret it, and she went offline. Yuna checked the signals. The black whale turned around. 180 fighters were heading south back the way they came. 7 lost. The defensive perimeter was impassable. Helen Park had lost. Not the battle, the argument. Daniel set down his radio. He looked at the crater at the 17 bodies with colored ribbons. Sarah was working. The regenerator slow heating. A 2% chance. On the 5th day, the first of the 17 opened his eyes. A man, 30 years old, pale, he looked at Sarah. He didn't understand. She was holding his hand with her warm hands and speaking softly, that he was alive, that they'd found him, that everything would be all right. She was crying for the first time in 2 years because she'd saved someone again, and knew she would save them. Within a week, 11 of the 17 had woken up. 6 hadn't survived. The regenerator isn't all-powerful. Sarah accepted every loss silently. Sarah recorded every loss in precise handwriting. But 11 people frozen for 10 months were breathing again. On the 12th day inside the crater, Daniel stood beside the network pillar and surveyed a clear 70-kilometer map. Everything was visible, everything was clear. Flocks, hideouts, people, guilds. Newcomers who would head out on their first mission tomorrow. Veterans looking for a route through Sector 4. Traders, middlemen, the abandoned, the lost, the living. He closed the map, opened another one. Communications. Through the hub of civilization, the signal traveled farther than any walkie-talkie. Farther than a satellite, through the ether layers all the way to Seattle. He dialed the number. A beep, a second, a third, fourth, a click. A voice, a woman's, tired, as familiar as his own heartbeat. Mom, he said hello. Told her he was okay, that he was alive, that he'd be back soon. That the money was already in her account. That the surgery would happen. That he'd found a good job. That he was working as a meteorologist, just like always. The voice on the other end fell silent. Then a sob. Then words. She said he was an idiot. That she'd read his letter. That she knew where he was. That she hadn't slept in 3 weeks. That if he was alive, he should come back immediately, or she'd come get him herself. Even if it meant going to the ends of the earth. He laughed quietly with tears in his eyes. He said that the ends of the earth was an accurate description, that he'd be there soon. True, he'd be there soon, that he had a team, good people, that they were looking out for him. Mom said she wanted to meet them. He said he'd introduce her. Definitely. The connection cut out after 3 minutes. The line couldn't hold any longer. 3 minutes. Mom's voice. Alive, angry, loving. 3 minutes that were worth all 20 days in the snow. He stood by the post and breathed. Maeve came up behind him quietly. She learned to walk silently. Or maybe he just didn't hear her over the pounding of his own heart. She stood beside him. Didn't ask who he'd been talking to. She knew. Silently, she held out a mug. Hot powder of civilization. Not cocoa, but hot. He took it. She stayed by his side, shoulder to shoulder. Mittens with seals on them. A spear at his feet. Below. Sarah treated the 11th revived survivor, while Yuna rebuilt the briefing interface into something faster and clearer. Minsu sat on the edge of the crater with a rifle. She was looking at the horizon. Tukors around her neck, hers and her brother's. Ashley was teaching Finn how to tie knots with thermal fabric. Han Jisoo was standing at the tunnel entrance, drinking coffee, real coffee. She'd found it in an ancient civilization container that everyone had overlooked. She said the ancient civilization knew a thing or two about coffee. Tom was patrolling the perimeter. Quiet footsteps, a steady rhythm, a soldier on duty. Daniel watched them. All of them. 6 women, 3 men, and 11 revived survivors now occupied a crater at the edge of the world. While morning coffee continued at Outpost 12. Reports come out every morning. The line is growing. Information flows to those who need it. Not cheap, not for free. Fairly. Like the weather. The weather belongs to no one. It just is. And someone has to interpret it. Daniel never became the strongest fighter, because strength was never his real advantage. He read danger before it arrived, then shared that knowledge with people everyone else abandoned. The weakest player turned a dying forecast into survival, family, wealth, and a future. In the endless tundra, Daniel Kim proved that information saves more lives when nobody owns it.